Close your eyes for a moment and let yourself drift backwards, far beyond history, far beyond memory. Imagine stepping away from the familiar world you know and entering a time more than 3 billion years ago. The Earth is still young, her face unshaped, her rhythms only beginning to settle into something resembling balance. If you stood here, if such a thing were possible, you would not recognize this planet as your home. You would find yourself standing at the edge of a world both alien and strangely familiar, a place where silence stretches across horizons and where time itself moves at a slower pace. The continents you know, Africa, Asia, the Americas, Europe, Australia, Antarctica, none of them exist yet. The crust of the Earth is restless, too unstable to hold great landmasses for long. What breaks the waters are only jagged ridges of volcanic rock, raw and dark, fresh from the furnace of the planet's heart. They rise like black teeth from the endless seas, steaming and cracking, their flanks washed constantly by waves. There are no forests upon them, no soil, no grasses bending in the wind, for the very concept of land life lies billions of years in the future. Stretching around these rocky islands is water, ocean upon ocean, vast and unbroken, spreading across the surface of the globe like a mirror for the heavens. But the heavens above are not the deep blue we know. Instead, the skies are cloaked in haze, thick with gases. Methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor form a heavy veil that scatters the sunlight into strange colors. The sun itself is younger, dimmer, and its light filters down not in the bright clarity of modern noon, but in muted golds and coppery tones. Every dawn is painted in fire, every dusk in a slow, lingering twilight. These oceans are not the clear blue waters of tropical seas or the deep navy of the open Atlantic. They are heavy, clouded, carrying dissolved minerals in abundance. Iron saturates them invisibly, filling the water like a secret held close. Hydrothermal vents along the seafloor gush hot fluids into the depths, bringing metals from Earth's mantle. Volcanoes erupt across ridges, spilling new rock and ash into the waves. The seas are alive, not with creatures as we know them, but with chemistry. They are vast laboratories, their experiments measured not in hours or days, but in millions of years. Imagine standing on the edge of one of those rocky shorelines, though there is no soft sand beneath your feet. Instead, the ground is black basalt, cracked and sharp, still cooling from fire. Steam rises in ghostly columns from fissures where seawater hisses against molten rock. The air is thick, difficult for us to breathe, for it is choked with methane and lacking the oxygen our bodies crave. Yet in this heavy atmosphere, the world feels whole, complete, perfectly tuned for the age it inhabits. The wind carries no bird song, no rustle of leaves, no insect hum. There is only the endless sigh of the waves and the low groaning of the earth as she shifts beneath your feet. It is a quiet world, and yet not empty. The silence is filled with presence, with anticipation. Time itself seems slower here, stretched and softened, like a deep current carrying everything forward. A single tide may take hours to rise and fall, and each rise is like the steady inhale of the planet, each fall a patient exhales. There are no seasons, no flowers blooming and fading, no autumn leaves drifting to the ground. Instead, there is constancy, the steady rhythm of the oceans and the endless shrouded light of the sky. Look out over those waters. They shimmer strangely in the muted sunlight, reflecting hues of green and bronze. Beneath their surface lies movement invisible to the human eye. Iron atoms drift endlessly, mingling with sulfur, with silica, with carbon. They swirl together in the currents, restless, unanchored, waiting for something. Though there are no witnesses to see it, the stage is already being set for transformation. The seas carry within them the ingredients for stories yet untold. Now close your eyes again and listen. The waves are not hurried, they break in slow patterns, curling around jagged rocks, hissing into steam. Beneath them, the earth herself speaks, though her voice is deep and difficult to hear. It rumbles in the distant thunder of volcanoes, in the hiss of vents upon the seafloor, in the shifting of stone upon stone. She is restless, but she is also patient. For the earth knows something that we, in our fleeting lifetimes, often forget, that great change does not need to rush. It builds quietly, moment by moment, until at last the world is reshaped. The oceans of this time are her canvas. The waters may seem silent, but they are alive with potential. They are heavy with stories waiting to be written, with reactions waiting to spark. Every current, every swirl of mineral-rich water, every burst of heat from the planet's depths is part of something greater. The Earth is waiting, but she does not wait idly. She waits with purpose, as if cradling a secret in her depths. This is the beginning of the tale of the banded iron formations, but it begins not with movement or drama. It begins in silence, in patience, in the endless seas of deep time. A world that looks empty to our eyes, but is, in truth, overflowing with possibility. The iron drifts invisibly, dissolved and unseen, a sleeping giant carried by the currents. Above, the sun glows weakly through its veil of haze, spilling soft golden light upon the waters. And all around, there is only the hush of eternity, the vast, unbroken quiet of a planet not yet ready to reveal what she is capable of. In this stillness, the story begins. The oceans of the Archean were not empty, though no fish swam their depths, though no whales sang in their waters, though no coral reefs stretched their bright fingers toward the light. These seas were filled with a presence, silent, invisible, and patient. They carried within them one of the most important ingredients of Earth's story, iron. To the human eye, if we could have gazed upon those waves, the water might have seemed ordinary, perhaps a little murkier than the seas we know today. But beneath that quiet surface was a richness we cannot easily imagine. Iron drifted everywhere, dissolved into the water the way sugar dissolves into tea. It was everywhere, in every current, in every tide, saturating the oceans so completely that the world itself seemed to shimmer with its hidden weight. Where did this iron come from? The answer lies deep within the Earth. The young planet was restless, her crust thin, her heart still burning hot. From the cracks in the seafloor, hydrothermal vents poured out mineral-rich fluids, hot plumes billowing upward like ghostly smoke. These vents carried metals, iron most of all, drawn up from the mantle where the Earth's heat and pressure brewed them. Volcanoes added their share too, spewing ash and rock into the oceans, breaking down, dissolving, feeding the seas with a constant rain of minerals. Every eruption, every plume of hot water, every trembling of the crust gave more iron to the waters. Picture those oceans as a vast cauldron, stirred by unseen hands. Iron drifted everywhere, invisible but potent, mingling with sulfur, silica, and carbon. Every current that moved beneath the hazy sky carried with it the legacy of the planet's inner fire. The seas of this time were unlike the seas of today. They were thicker, stranger, filled with chemistry rather than creatures. It was as though the oceans themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to awaken. And yet, despite all this richness, the iron remained dissolved, unclaimed, untaken. It drifted endlessly, restless, a sleeping giant spread thin across the planet. Every drop of seawater carried its burden, and every tide bore with it a quiet secret. Iron had patience, just as the Earth had patience. It would wait as long as it needed to, until something appeared that could set it free. Imagine floating in those waters. The sunlight, filtered through the methane haze above, would not pierce far beneath the surface. The world below would quickly become dim, shadows stretching in green and brown rather than the clear blues we know. Yet even in this twilight, iron was everywhere, invisible, silent, but present. With every motion of the waves, with every roll of the tide, with every deep current sweeping across the seafloor, iron drifted onward, circling the world in endless repetition. The chemistry of these seas is difficult for us to grasp, because we live in a world already shaped by oxygen. Our oceans today are different, clearer, thinner, easier for creatures like us to imagine. But in the Archean, the seas were something else entirely. Heavy, thick with dissolved metals, holding the ingredients of a future no one could yet see. They were waiting seas, pregnant with potential, burdened by their richness. And it is here, in this vast oceanic cauldron, that the story of the banded iron formations begins to gather momentum. For the iron in the water was not meant to drift forever. It was not meant to remain invisible. One day, something would stir it, something so small it could not be seen, something fragile and humble, yet powerful enough to set in motion a transformation that would echo for billions of years. For now, though, the iron remained in silence. It lay dissolved, hidden from view, carried by waves that lapped against black volcanic shores. It filled the depths, pooling in basins, circling in currents, endlessly waiting. And as the Earth turned beneath the haze of her young sky, she seemed to whisper to herself, as though she already knew, "This iron is the paint, and soon life will pick up the brush." The oceans held their secret tightly. Day by day, year by year, for millions upon millions of years, the iron remained adrift, unshaped. It was a resource, a possibility, a story waiting for its first word. All the while, the tides moved in their ancient rhythm, pulling the seas under the moon's young gaze, moving iron from one shore to another, stirring it, spreading it, preparing it. The earth was patient, and so too was the iron. And as we leave this moment, this world of drifting minerals and waiting seas, we step toward the arrival of something new, something fragile, something tiny, but something that will change everything. For soon, in the quiet shallows, in waters warmed by the sun, the first breath will be taken, and the iron will no longer be free. The oceans of the Archean were not hurried places. They did not rush. They did not crash with the violence we so often imagine. Instead, they moved in slow, patient rhythms, their tides drawn by a moon that hung much closer in the sky than ours does today. That moon, still cooling from its own fiery birth, pulled the oceans with a stronger hand, making their rise and fall greater, deeper, more commanding. And yet, despite this strength, the seas seemed unhurried, as though they had all the time in the universe to stretch and breathe. The Archean seas were not filled with color or movement as we know them now. No shoals of fish scattered in silver flashes beneath the surface. No whales sang their songs across the deep. No coral reefs bloomed like underwater gardens. Instead, there was silence and stillness, broken only by the long inhale and exhale of tides, the slow roll of waves across volcanic shores. These seas were not empty, but they wore a cloak of mystery. To us, they would have seemed vast and desolate, yet beneath their surface, they carried possibilities so profound that they would one day shape the very course of life itself. Think of the surface of those waters. Under a dim, hazy sky, the seas reflected not blue but a muted bronze green, touched by the faint sunlight that filtered through methane and carbon-rich air. When the winds moved, the waves shimmered with strange colors, flecks of mineral-rich foam dancing in the dim glow. At dawn and dusk, the entire ocean seemed to glow like a molten mirror, each ripple catching the light of a young sun struggling to pierce the veil of haze. Beneath the surface, however, was a world of endless patience. The currents moved like slow rivers within the sea, carrying with them dissolved iron, silica, and countless other minerals. They swirled in vast loops that took centuries to complete, drifting from shallow shelves into deep basins and back again. These currents did not race. They drifted, meandered, twisted in silence. It was a world where time stretched, where each moment seemed to last longer than it does in our hurried age. The seafloor, too, carried this patience. Volcanic ridges crisscrossed the depths, glowing faintly where new rock pushed upward, spilling heat into the water. Hydrothermal vents, like underwater chimneys, spewed mineral-laden water into the sea, creating clouds of shimmering particles that hung suspended, drifting slowly downward. Around them, there was no life as we would see today, no crabs, no tube worms, no fish, but the chemistry was alive, restless in its own quiet way. Minerals mingled, separated, recombined, in endless repetition. The seafloor seemed to whisper a single word: wait. Above these hidden depths, the surface world moved in its own rhythm. The tides rolled forward and back, pulled by the moon, their cycles unbroken, their song eternal. In the absence of forests and mountains, in the absence of all the familiar landmarks of our world, it was the seas themselves that set the pace of time. Their patience was the planet's patience, an echo of the deep truth that all things on Earth would unfold slowly, layer by layer, moment by moment. Imagine yourself floating upon those waters. There are no gulls above you, no dolphins breaking the surface, no sails or ships or laughter carried across the breeze. There is only the endless horizon, the steady lap of water against stone, and the hush of a world not yet busy with life. The air is heavy, thick with gases, and yet in its stillness there is comfort, as though the planet herself is cradling you in her arms. The seas stretch in every direction, unbroken, boundless. It is easy to feel small here, but it is also easy to feel calm. The vastness of the world takes away the need for haste. The patient seats were teachers. They showed that life, when it came, did not need to rush. The cycles of the tides, the endless movement of currents, the slow cooling of volcanic shores, all these taught the lesson of deep time. They whispered that everything worth becoming would take millions of years to unfold, that change could be gentle and relentless at once. The seas carried this wisdom, and every ripple seemed to hum with it. And within that patience, iron drifted, invisible, silent, restless in its waiting. It did not fall, not yet. It did not settle into stone, not yet. It drifted endlessly, swirling in currents that wrapped around the globe, moving with the tides, touching every shore and every depth. The seas were its cradle, and in their patience, they held it safe until the moment came for change. In these oceans, silence and slowness were not emptiness. They were preparing. The waters held their breath, the tides carried their rhythms, and the world waited with infinite calm. For soon, in the quiet shallows, life would awaken. Tiny, fragile, and unseen, it would take the first breath of oxygen, and in doing so, it would reach into the patient seas and stir the iron that had drifted for so long. The story is not one of rushing, but of waiting. The patient seas remind us that time itself is a great ocean, moving slowly, carrying us forward, even when we do not notice. And in their patience, they carried the seeds of transformation. There comes a moment in every great story when silence is broken, when stillness gives way to something new. For the Archean oceans, that moment was not a sudden roar, not a violent upheaval, but a whisper, so quiet it could only be measured in breath. A fragile breath, exhaled not by something grand or mighty, but by the smallest of beings, invisible to the naked eye. In the shallow edges of the seas, where sunlight reached down into gentle warmth, tiny organisms drifted. They were not plants, for no trees or flowers yet graced the earth. They were not animals, for no creature yet swam or walked. They were bacteria, small, simple cells that floated like dust motes in water. To us, they might seem insignificant, smaller than the smallest grain of sand, but in their simplicity lay a secret so profound that it would change the course of the world forever. These bacteria, cyanobacteria, were unlike any other life that had come before. They had learned a trick, one that seems ordinary to us now but was nothing less than miraculous then. They had discovered how to drink the light of the sun. Using the warmth and brilliance that filtered through the haze of the sky, they could turn sunlight into energy. And in doing so, they released something into the water, something unseen, something the earth had never known in abundance before: oxygen. It is strange to think of oxygen as dangerous, as disruptive, as world-changing. For us, it is life itself, the very breath we draw with ease. But in the Archean seas, oxygen was an intruder, a newcomer. The world was not prepared for it. And yet there it was, bubbling gently from the bodies of tiny drifting microbes, filling the water around them with invisible potential. Imagine leaning close to one of those shallow pools, warmed by the sun, stirred by soft tides. To your eyes, it might look ordinary, just water with a faint greenish tint where microbial colonies gathered. But look closer, and you would see mats of cyanobacteria, thin films spreading across the surface of rocks, soft and shimmering in the light. These mats were quiet, but alive, each cell tirelessly drinking sunlight, splitting water molecules, and breathing out oxygen as though exhaling a sigh. There was not much oxygen at first. In fact, almost all of it vanished as soon as it was made, consumed instantly by the iron-rich waters that surrounded these fragile pioneers. But still, the cyanobacteria continued, breath after breath, day after day, generation after generation. They worked not with haste, but with persistence, exhaling life into the oceans in a rhythm as steady as the tides themselves. Think of their world. No predators threatened them. No larger life forms disturbed their colonies. They drifted in peace, stirred only by currents and waves. The sun rose and fell through the haze, painting their pools with copper dawns and golden twilights. Their lives were short, but their numbers were many, and together they formed carpets across rocks and shoals, small empires of unseen architects. And with every breath, the world inched closer to change. The seas did not know it yet, the skis did not know it yet, and even the bacteria themselves did not know it. But with every exhale, with every tiny bubble of oxygen, the earth was being rewritten. This was the first breath, the beginning of the Great Oxidation, though that name would not be spoken for billions of years. At the time, it was just the quiet work of unseen life, the patient exhalations of organisms smaller than dust. Yet in their persistence lay the power of revolution. It is humbling to imagine that all the forests, all the animals, all the people who would one day walk this earth trace their origins back to these fragile breaths. Without cyanobacteria, there would be no blue sky, no air to fill our lungs, no life as we know it. The world we inherit was built on the patient labor of these tiny creatures, their gift of oxygen carried silently into the oceans. At first, their breath seemed to vanish, consumed instantly by the iron that drifted through the seas. But something remarkable was beginning. The balance of chemistry was shifting, and the oceans were preparing to reveal their secret. For every bubble of oxygen that touched iron, a story was written, a mark was made, and the first steps toward the banded iron formations had begun. The first breaths were gentle, quiet, and unnoticed, but as with all great beginnings, they did not need to be loud to be powerful. They were enough. At first, the breath of the cyanobacteria seemed to disappear. Each fragile bubble of oxygen, born from sunlight and water, rose into the seas and was gone almost instantly. The oceans were hungry, and they devoured the oxygen as quickly as it was made. To the cyanobacteria, it made no difference. They continued their work tirelessly, exhaling in rhythm with the dawn and the dusk. But to the earth, something subtle, something profound, was beginning to unfold. The oceans were heavy with iron. For countless millions of years, volcanic vents and hydrothermal plumes had filled the waters with it. Iron drifted invisibly, dissolved in every current, saturating the seas until they were brimming with it. And oxygen, so new to this world, was drawn to it like a moth to flame. Every molecule of oxygen sought out iron, binding with it in an instant, transforming it into rust, tiny flakes of iron oxide that began to fall like red dust through the water. This reaction was relentless, a secret dance happening everywhere in the seas. To the surface, nothing seemed to change. The oceans looked the same, dim, bronze-green under their hazy skies, quiet in their rolling tides. But beneath, in every drop of water, a war of chemistry was being waged, silent and unseen. Oxygen appeared, iron seized it, and together they sank downward. It was a battle with no noise, no light, no drama, only patience, only persistence. Imagine yourself floating in those waters, though they would not welcome you. Around you, the cyanobacteria drift in their colonies, tiny architects working without rest. Each cell breathes out oxygen in silence. To your eye, it would look like nothing, perhaps only a faint shimmer of green where the microbial mats gather. Yet in truth, every shimmer is a storm, every shimmer is a whisper of change. The oceans themselves seem to resist this newcomer. They swallowed the oxygen whole, as though unwilling to allow it to rise, unwilling to let it spill into the skies. The iron in the water acted as a guardian, capturing every breath before it could escape, dragging it into the depths, binding it into stone. The earth was not yet ready for an atmosphere filled with oxygen. Not yet. And so the cyanobacteria worked in secret. Their exhalations never reached the air. Their breaths never touched the sky. They filled the seas instead, saturating the water with whispers of oxygen that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. But in their vanishing, something enduring was being created. The iron, once restless, once dissolved and drifting, was being transformed. Every breath left a mark. Every exhale painted another stroke on the seafloor canvas. It is humbling to imagine this secret process, to think of how the greatest revolutions often begin in silence. No one saw it happen. No one marked the moment. There were no eyes to witness it, no minds to wonder at it, no voices to speak of it. And yet, for millions of years, the seas filled with hidden activity, life and stone weaving together a quiet tapestry that would one day be revealed as banded iron formations. The patience of the earth is unlike ours. We look for change in days, in seasons, in lifetimes. The earth looks for change in ages, in eons, in cycles that stretch beyond our comprehension. The oxygen in secret was just such a change, slow, invisible, but unstoppable. With every passing year, the oceans took in more oxygen, transformed more iron, and laid down another thin veil of rust upon their floors. Layer upon layer, cycle upon cycle, until the hidden story grew vast. Think of it, a single cyanobacterium might live only for hours or days, breathing, dividing, drifting. Its life was small, fragile, and short, but multiplied by trillions, across millions of years, their breaths became mighty enough to alter the entire chemistry of the oceans. And though each breath seemed to vanish, consumed by iron, it did not vanish in vain. It left behind evidence, layer after layer, stripe after stripe, the Earth's first painted memory. In this chapter of Earth's story, oxygen was not yet free. It lived a secret life, hidden in rust, bound to iron, buried beneath the seas. It did not yet fill the sky, did not yet spark the great transformation to come. But in its secrecy, it was patient, just as the seas were patient. It was laying foundations, building slowly, quietly, waiting for the day when iron would finally be sated, when oxygen could slip past the ocean's grasp and rise into the heavens. For now, though, the Earth kept her secret. The skies remained heavy with haze, the seas remained strange and dim, and life continued its quiet work. Breath by breath, molecule by molecule, the invisible dance carried on, unnoticed but unstoppable. And deep in the oceans, the seafloor was beginning to change, painted with stripes of red and black, a diary of oxygen written in stone. The oceans were changing, though no eye could see it and no voice could name it. What had once been clear and silent waters heavy with dissolved iron were now beginning to shift. For millions upon millions of years, oxygen and iron had been dancing in secret, each breath from the cyanobacteria meeting its partner in the depths. And together, they performed a slow, relentless waltz, oxygen binding to iron, iron surrendering to oxygen, and both sinking gently downward as rust. Imagine the immensity of this world. Across every ocean basin, in every shallow sea and deep current, the same quiet transformation unfolded. Oxygen met iron, and rust was born, not in great clouds, not in visible storms, but in countless tiny particles, red, earthy, delicate, that drifted downward through the water column. It was as though the oceans themselves were rusting from the inside out, bleeding a soft crimson into their very bones. The cyanobacteria did not know. They simply continued their endless work, exhaling with the rise of the sun, inhaling with the fall of night. Their breath was quiet, their persistence absolute. Every moment new oxygen appeared, and every moment iron seized it, binding it tight, dragging it downward in silence. The bacteria lived and died in cycles too quick to notice against the backdrop of deep time, but their collective labor reshaped the chemistry of a planet. Close your eyes and picture this. The water around you, dim beneath the methane haze sky, is filled with unseen dust. Each particle is no larger than a whisper, no heavier than a dream. Yet in their countless numbers, they form a rain of rust, falling day after day, century after century, eon after eon. They never cease. They never tire. They drift like snowflakes, settling softly upon the seafloor, layer upon layer, building a story one grain at a time. This was a rusting world, though it would not have looked red to the naked eye, not yet. The transformation was too slow, too quiet, too patient. But deep below, the record was being written. The seafloor grew striped with iron oxides, alternating with layers of silica and other minerals, each new deposit marking another passage of time. The planet was writing her diary in colors of red and black, long before any creature would come to read it. It's humbling to imagine how vast these deposits became. For billions of years, this process continued, every shallow pool, every wide basin, every drifting tide taking part. The scale is almost too large for us to hold in our minds. Imagine a snowfall that never ends, that falls not for days but for millions of years. Imagine it covering not just fields or mountains, but entire oceans. That was the rusting world, an unbroken rain of mineral snow falling patiently into eternity. The Earth seemed almost to conspire in this process. Volcanoes fed the seas with fresh iron. Hydrothermal vents breathed minerals into the depths. The very rocks of the crust dissolved into the waters, adding to the abundance. And each time, oxygen answered, transforming what the Earth offered into rust, carrying it down to the waiting seafloor. It was a partnership between planet and microbe, between stone and life, each one shaping the other in silence. And though the transformation was invisible to the skis, it was not wasted. The iron that once drifted aimlessly was now anchored. It was bound into stone, locked into the layers that grew thicker and stronger with each passing cycle. The oceans that once seemed limitless were being slowly cleansed of their burden, though it would take ages beyond reckoning. The iron was being stored, tucked away, laid to rest in the Earth's deep memory. This was not a sudden change. It did not happen in a single year or even 1,000. It happened so slowly that even the planet herself might have seemed still. But patience is the language of the Earth. She does not rush. She allows change to unfold in silence, in persistence, in the accumulation of countless small moments. And in that patience, the rusting of the world became one of the most profound transformations in Earth's history. Picture the seafloor now, where once there had been bare volcanic stone, rough and black, there was now a blanket of layers, thin at first, then thicker, then massive beyond measure. Bands of red iron oxide, dark stripes of silica, repeating endlessly like the bars of a song. Each band was a season in the planet's long memory, each stripe a testament to cycles of oxygen and iron. To walk among those layers today is to walk inside a story written not in ink, but in stone. This was the rusting of a world, slow, patient, and absolute, A transformation so vast, so steady, that it became the foundation of what was to come. For once the oceans had rusted enough, once the iron had been captured and bound, oxygen would no longer be held in secret. It would escape into the skies, and the world would never be the same again. But that day had not yet come. For now, the world remained hidden, her greatest changes happening in silence. The seas still shimmered with minerals, the skies still hung heavy with haze, and the cyanobacteria still worked in peace, unaware of the legacy they were building. Breath by breath, particle by particle, layer by layer, the rusting world carried on. There are moments in Earth's story when something so vast, so powerful, happens so slowly that it takes on the quiet grace of poetry. The rain of rust that fell through the Archean seas was one such moment. Day after day, century after century, eon upon eon, the oceans filled with a gentle snowfall, not of ice, not of crystal water, but of iron. Red snow drifts endlessly downward, painting the seafloor in colors unseen by any living eye. Picture the surface of those ancient seas. Above, the sky glowed dim and hazy, the sun filtering through methane and carbon, its light softened into bronze and gold. Below, the waters were thick with dissolved iron, stirred gently by tides and currents. Cyanobacteria floated in colonies across the shallows, their tiny bodies turning sunlight into energy, exhaling oxygen into the seas. And with each exhale, the oceans responded, iron binding instantly with oxygen, forming particles too small to see, yet destined for greatness. Those particles began to fall. They drifted slowly, softly, like a dream unraveling. Through the dim water they sank, tiny flecks of rust glimmering faintly where the light could still touch them. They did not rush. They did not tumble. They floated with patience, descending layer upon layer onto the waiting seafloor, and they never stopped. Day and night, in silence and shadow, the red snow fell, blanketing the Earth's oceans with memories. Imagine standing upon the seafloor then, if such a thing were possible. Around you stretches a landscape of black volcanic stone, still warm in places where the Earth's fire pushes close. Above you, the water is dark, carrying the faint glow of sunlight in its upper reaches. And then you see it, the snowfall, tiny red motes drifting down like embers from a fire, settling gently upon the rock. They move with the currents, swaying, swirling, yet always downward, always toward rest. The longer you watch, the more endless it seems, a snowstorm of iron falling for millions of years without pause. It was not only red. At times when oxygen waned, when the cyanobacteria faltered or conditions shifted, other minerals took their place. Silica drifted down, creating darker layers, and so the snow alternated, red with oxygen's presence, black with its absence, a rhythm of life and silence captured in stone. Together, these alternating snows wrote the first chapters of the Earth's geological memory. The beauty of this image is not in its speed or its spectacle, but in its patience. Each flake of iron oxide was so small as to be invisible, and yet, over ages too vast for us to measure in human terms, they built mountains. They laid down deposits so thick and so strong that billions of years later, they would rise above the seas as cliffs and deserts, standing as monuments to the quietest snowfall in history. Think of the stillness of those oceans as the snow fell. There was no roar of waves breaking against cliffs, no cries of seabirds, no hum of human life, only the hush of water, the slow pull of tides, and the steady, ceaseless drift of particles from surface to depth. The Earth was silent, and yet she was busy, recording her story in the language of stone. The red snow was more than chemistry. It was a collaboration between life and the planet itself. Without the cyanobacteria, there would be no oxygen to begin the process. Without the iron, there would be no particles to fall, no layers to build. Together, life and stone created something enduring, something beautiful, something that would outlast them both. It was as if the Earth and her smallest inhabitants were weaving a tapestry together, each contributing thread after thread until the pattern was complete. And though no one watched, though no eyes yet existed to marvel at it, the snow did not cease. It fell through countless generations of microbes, through the slow turning of the Earth beneath a dim sun, through the endless pull of the tides. It fell when volcanoes shook the seas, and it fell in the stillness between eruptions. It fell when cyanobacteria thrived, and it fell when they waned. The red snow became the heartbeat of the oceans, steady, persistent, and eternal. To us, the idea of snow is fleeting, flakes that melt upon our skin, storms that pass in a night. But to the Earth, snow could last for eons. Each particle of rust was a snowflake of time, a frozen moment of chemistry made solid, falling into the deep to become part of the planet's diary. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it even now, the soft, soundless fall of rust, the patient settling of dust upon stone, a snowfall not of winter, but of ages, a snowfall not of ice, but of memory. The ocean's red snow was the quiet poetry of a world in transformation, a gentle storm that wrote the future in silence. And though the seas seemed unchanged, though the skies remained heavy and dim, beneath the surface, something monumental was taking shape. The seafloor was being painted stripe by stripe, a canvas of deep time unfurling. The earth was preparing her masterpiece, and the brush was the smallest breath of life. The oceans did not fall silent after the red snow began. Instead, they revealed a deeper rhythm, a cycle written not just in iron, but in contrast, in alternation, in the quiet balance between presence and absence. For the seafloor was not painted only in rust-red layers. Between those glowing bands of iron oxide, there were stripes of darkness, black layers that told their own story. These black bands were formed when oxygen faltered, when the tiny architects of change, the cyanobacteria, could not keep pace. Their lives were fragile, dependent on light and balance. When sunlight dimmed through thickened haze, when nutrients thinned in the waters, their numbers waned. In those moments, the ocean's breath grew shallow. Less oxygen was exhaled, less rust formed, and in the silence left behind, other minerals took their place. Silica, carried by currents, drifted downward, creating darker layers, shadows upon the seafloor, whispers of times when life paused. Imagine these cycles as the heartbeat of a young planet. Oxygen surged, and red iron fell like snow. Oxygen faltered, and darkness layered itself in silence. Back and forth, the pattern continued, red and black, black and red, as steady as tides, as endless as time. Each stripe was a memory, each alternation a rhythm. It was as though the earth was writing music in stone, the red bands her crescendos, the black her rests. To stand in front of these formations today is to witness that rhythm frozen forever. Towering cliffs of banded iron stretch skyward in places where oceans once lay. Their stripes, bold and unbroken, look like the strokes of a great painter's brush, red and black, repeating into eternity. Yet each band is more than art. It is a diary, a record of oceans breathing, of microbes rising and falling, of chemistry shifting with time. Close your eyes and return to those ancient seas. You see the red snow falling, drifting endlessly downward. But now imagine it slowing, thinning, vanishing. The cyanobacteria have grown fewer, their breath weaker. For a time, oxygen is scarce, and the seas take back their silence. From the water, silica begins to settle instead, fine particles drifting into the depths. They gather, layer upon layer, painting the seafloor not with fire but with shadow. It is not emptiness, but pause, a time when the brush of life lifted, only to return again. This cycle may have lasted centuries, millennia, even longer. There was no rush. The earth had no need to hurry her music. Her composition stretched across millions of years, each band a single note in a song that unfolded over eons. The alternation of red and black was not random. It was an order born of balance, of struggle, of resilience. It was the earth finding her rhythm in the dance between stone and breath. And yet to us, the black bands seem as mysterious as they are beautiful. They are the shadows between moments, the pauses in the story. They remind us that even in progress, there is rest. Even in creation, there are silences. The earth did not paint her masterpiece all at once, but slowly, with patience, with space between each stroke. The beauty of the banded iron formations lies not only in their color, but in their contrast. Red cannot exist without black. Oxygen cannot be recognized without silence. Life cannot be measured without stillness to frame it. The black stripes are the shadows that make the red glow brighter, the rests that give the music its meaning. Picture the seafloor once more. The red layers glow softly, built of countless particles of rust, each one a whisper of oxygen. Between them, the black layers spread, darker, quieter, built of silica and stillness. Together, they weave a tapestry, not uniform but patterned, not chaotic but ordered. It is the handwriting of the earth, elegant and steady, etched into the very bones of the planet. Billions of years later, when geologists first traced these stripes with their fingers, they were not only studying rocks. They were listening to music written in stone. They were hearing the rhythm of ancient seas, the rise and fall of life too small to see but powerful enough to shape a world. And in that rhythm, they found the deep truth that creation is not constant but cyclical. It comes in waves, in breaths, in alternating moments of abundance and silence. The black stripes are not empty, they are memories. They are the Earth's way of marking time, of showing that even in quiet, the story continues. Without them, the red would be meaningless. Without silence, a song has no shape. Without shadow, light cannot shine. And so the oceans kept painting. Red snow fell, black shadows followed. Red life surged, black silence returned. Over millions of years, the seafloor became a canvas of contrasts, a diary written in color and pause. The Earth's heartbeat continued, steady, relentless, whispering through ages that no creature yet walked to hear. The Earth has always had a rhythm. We feel it today in the turning of seasons, in the rise and fall of tides, in the heartbeat of day and night. But long before forests grew or rivers carved their valleys, long before creatures walked or breathed the air, that rhythm was already present. It pulsed in the Archean seas, steady and unbroken, carried not by voices or drums, but by chemistry, by stone, by the smallest breath of life. The red snow of iron and the black shadows of silica were not random. They came in patterns, repeating across ages, painting the seafloor in stripes of color. To us, they appear frozen, bands of rock stacked neatly upon one another, like pages bound into the spine of a book. But to the Earth, those layers were a song, a composition written over millions of years, each band a note in her endless music. What gave rise to these rhythms? Many forces worked together. The cyanobacteria themselves breathed in cycles, their numbers rising and falling with changes in sunlight, nutrients, and water. Sometimes they thrived, multiplying until the seas shimmered with their green mats. At those times, oxygen flowed freely, rust bloomed, and red snow fell in abundance. But then, conditions shifted. Perhaps the seas grew cloudy with ash from distant volcanoes, dimming the sunlight. Perhaps nutrients ran thin, leaving the microbes hungry. In those moments, they dwindled, their breath slowed, and the oceans fell into silence. Silica drifted down instead, painting the seafloor in black. The Earth herself added her own rhythm. Volcanoes erupted, pouring iron and ash into the seas, feeding the cycle anew. Hydrothermal vents breathed minerals into the depths, their plumes rich with metals, their heat stirring the waters. Even the tides, pulled by the young moon so close above, lent their steady pulse, mixing the oceans and shaping the spread of life. All these forces braided together, weaving patterns that stretched across eons. Think of it as a symphony. The microbes provided the melody, their exhalations rising and falling in time with the light. The Earth provided the bass, her volcanoes and vents beating like drums beneath the waves. The tides added rhythm, their pull steady as the plucking of a string. Together, they played a music so vast, so patient, that it could not be heard in a single lifetime. It could only be seen, written in stripes of stone, when the music was long finished. And yet those rhythms endure. They are preserved in the banded iron formations, the layers of red and black stretching across cliffs and quarries, deserts and valleys. Each stripe tells of a moment when oxygen surged, when life exhaled strongly enough to paint the seas. Each dark band tells of a pause, a silence, a time when the Earth drew back and waited. Together they tell a story of balance, of abundance and rest, of presence and absence, of breath and stillness. Close your eyes and imagine the slow turning of those cycles. A million years passes like a single heartbeat. Red bands grow thicker, then black ones take their place. The Earth shifts, and the pattern continues, unbroken. It is like waves on a shore, never the same, yet always returning. The story of life is not a straight line. It is a rhythm, a pulse, a dance. And in this rhythm, there is wisdom. The Earth does not rush. She teaches that growth comes in cycles, that silence has its place, that pause is as important as song. Just as the microbes breathed and rested, just as the oceans alternated between red snow and black shadow, so too does all of life move in patterns. Seasons turn, forests rise and fall, creatures are born and pass away, and through it all, the rhythm continues. When geologists trace their fingers across the stripes of banded iron, they are not just studying rock. They are listening to the heartbeat of the planet. They are reading the sheet music of an ancient symphony, written not with ink, but with minerals, not with notes, but with layers. Each band is a measure, each stripe a stanza, together forming a song older than any human dream. This was the rhythm of the Archean, the pulse of a world finding its balance. It was not hurried, not frantic. It was patient, steady, eternal. And it whispered a lesson that echoes even now, that time is not a line but a cycle, that creation is not a rush but a rhythm, that the earth moves not in haste but in music. The red snow and the black silence were the first verses of that music, the first refrain of a song that would one day carry forests, rivers, mountains, and life itself. They were the earth's way of finding her voice, of discovering her tempo, of preparing the stage for all that would follow. And so the rhythm continued, unbroken, for millions upon millions of years. Breath and silence, red and black, presence and absence, written again and again in stone. The heartbeat of the planet carried on, steady as the tides, eternal as the stars. As the cycles of red snow and black shadow continued, as oxygen and iron wove their patient dance, the seafloor began to change. Layer upon layer, century after century, eon after eon, the thin blankets of rust and silica accumulated, pressing downward, compressing, becoming stone. What began as flecks of drifting dust became sheets, and those sheets became strata, and those strata, in their patience, rose into monuments of quiet grandeur. Imagine the vast seafloor now, no longer bare volcanic stone, but covered in bands of iron and silica. At first, these layers were thin, fragile, delicate as parchment, but with time, with weight, with persistence, they grew into something else entirely. They became walls. They became pillars. They became structures so immense that to walk among them today feels like standing in a cathedral, the silence around you filled with the echoes of deep time. Close your eyes and picture it. Immense columns of stone stretching upward from the seafloor, arches formed by layers bending and folding under the weight of the oceans above. Light from the surface barely penetrates this deep, but where it does, it spills through like sunlight through stained glass, glinting red from iron and black from silica. The water is hushed, thick, pressing down with the weight of the entire ocean. And yet, in this darkness, a beauty lingers, solemn, reverent, eternal. These cathedrals were not carved by human hands, nor raised in haste. They were built by the smallest of beings, by countless cyanobacteria breathing across countless generations. Their invisible labor, multiplied and magnified over billions of years, erected temples of stone greater than anything we could imagine. And they did so without intention, without design, simply by living, by breathing, by exhaling oxygen into the seas. There is a sacredness to this thought, that the tiniest breath, repeated endlessly, could create monuments vast enough to reshape the earth, that what is humble can also be mighty given time, that stone itself can be a hymn to patience. These cathedrals of the deep are reminders that creation does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, layering dust upon dust until eternity takes shape. Picture the seafloor as it looked then, not silent plains of rock, but landscapes of towers and ridges, stripes of red and black rising like tapestries unfurled across the ocean floor. Imagine drifting through those halls as if through some vast gallery, every wall painted with the brush of time, every arch rising higher than memory. The water moves softly around you, carrying silence like incense, the only sound the faint whisper of currents brushing against stone. And though no eye yet existed to see them, no mind to marvel at them, the cathedrals endured. They stood as quiet guardians of Earth's memory, waiting for the day when the oceans would retreat, when the continents would rise, when creatures with hands and voices would walk the land and discover them. They waited in silence, their beauty hidden beneath the waves, their grandeur known only to the earth herself. Think of the weight of those layers. Each band of iron, each stripe of silica, pressed down by the oceans above, compacted into stone harder than almost any other. Over time, these formations became the very bones of continents, the foundations upon which mountains would rise, the cores of cratons that would endure for billions of years. The cathedrals of the deep were not only monuments, they were architecture, the scaffolding of a planet still in its youth. To stand before these rocks today is to stand before a time machine. Their stripes stretch higher than a person, wider than valleys, older than almost any stone on Earth. They are pages from the planet's oldest book, and yet they look like works of art, patterns so precise and beautiful that it is hard to believe they were not designed. But they were not designed. They were written, slowly, endlessly, patiently, by chemistry, and by breath. The silence of the deep only made them grander. Imagine that stillness, no fish darting between shadows, no whales singing across the distance, no coral clinging to stone, only emptiness, water, and time. The halls of these cathedrals stretched into darkness, their arches unseen, their towers unmeasured. And within that silence, the earth herself seemed to hum, as though the stone resonated with the weight of ages. The cathedrals of the deep remind us that beauty does not need an audience to exist. They were magnificent long before eyes evolved to see them. They were sacred long before minds existed to name them. Their grandeur was not made for us. It was made by time, by persistence, by the quiet collaboration of life and stone. And even now, billions of years later, when these formations rise into the air, forming cliffs and deserts, they still carry the echoes of their first halls beneath the sea. To walk among them is to walk in silence older than breath, to stand in a cathedral not made by hands, but by eternity itself. Beneath the haze of the Archean sky, beneath the rolling bronze-green seas, there drifted the smallest of beings. They had no bones, no eyes, no limbs. They did not roar or move with power. They simply floated, carried by the tides, sunlit and fragile, each one a cell so small that countless billions could fit into the palm of a single hand. And yet these were the architects of the Earth's first monuments. These were the endless builders, cyanobacteria. It is difficult for us to grasp how something so small could shape something so vast. We think of builders as beings who carve stone with tools, who raise walls and arches with strength and intent. But the cyanobacteria had no such design. They built without knowing, without purpose, without plans drawn or stones stacked. They built simply by living, by breathing, by drinking in sunlight, and releasing their invisible exhale. Every time they breathed, a molecule of oxygen slipped into the water around them. To us, oxygen is ordinary, invisible, unnoticed except in its absence. But to the Archean seas, it was something new, something disruptive, something powerful. And the oceans, brimming with dissolved iron, responded instantly, binding every breath into rust, sending it drifting downward like snow. In this way, the cyanobacteria became masons of the seafloor, layering stone with every exhale. They worked tirelessly, not because they chose to, but because life is persistence. Each generation lived only briefly, hours or days at most, then was replaced by the next, and the next, and the next. The cycle of birth and death was constant, unbroken, endless. Yet the work they accomplished across ages was greater than any dynasty of kings, any empire of humans. For their monuments were continents, their legacy the very air we breathe. Picture a shallow sea where sunlight filters through haze. Across its rocky bed stretches a soft mat, greenish in hue, slimy in texture, almost unremarkable. It clings to the stone like a living carpet, pulsing faintly with life. These mats of cyanobacteria are humble in appearance, but they are factories of change. Day after day, they drink in the light, split water molecules, and breathe out oxygen. They leave behind not grandeur for the eye, but transformation for the world. Now imagine those mats multiplied across countless shallow shores, drifting across tidal flats, floating in pools, spreading along volcanic coasts. Imagine them multiplied by millions, by billions, by trillions. Each one so small, each one so fragile, yet together so mighty that they changed the course of Earth's history. Their invisible breath rusted the oceans, their quiet persistence layered the seafloor, their endless building created cathedrals of stone. There is a quiet lesson here, that greatness does not always roar, that change does not always come from strength or speed. Sometimes it comes from persistence, from the smallest action repeated endlessly, faithfully, until the world itself bends around it. The cyanobacteria were endless builders not because they were strong, but because they never ceased. Breath by breath, generation after generation, they gave the earth her first taste of transformation. It is humbling to think that all of us, every tree, every bird, every person walking beneath the open sky, owe our existence to these builders. Without their oxygen, there would be no forests, no animals, no humans to marvel at their story. They did not know what they were doing. They did not set out to create futures. And yet, their endless labor shaped everything that came after. Beneath the surface of those ancient seas, they worked in silence. Their colonies bloomed and waned, their mats grew and decayed, their breath poured endlessly into the waters. And though each life was short, their legacy was infinite. They were the masons of time, laying bricks of stone not by hand, but by chemistry, not by intention, but by persistence. The cathedrals of the deep, the banded iron formations that would one day rise as cliffs and deserts, are their monuments. Every stripe of red is a breath they release. Every dark band has a pause in their song. Every layer is proof of their patience. To walk among those stones today is to walk in the footprints of beings too small to see but too mighty to ignore. The endless builders remind us that change is not always loud. It can be quiet, it can be gentle, it can be as small as a breath, as fragile as a cell, as humble as a mat of green across a tide pool. And yet, if it is repeated, if it is persistent, if it is carried forward through ages, it can reshape a world. So the cyanobacteria built, not knowing, not intending, but becoming architects nonetheless. They worked in silence, with no audience, no applause, no recognition. And still they built. They built until the oceans themselves were rusted, until stone recorded their breath, until the air began to change. They were the endless builders, the patient masons of Earth's first monuments, and their work echoes still in every breath we take. Change does not always arrive with thunder. It does not always roar like fire or crack like stone. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it is so patient that it unfolds in silence, so gradual that no single moment could ever be called its beginning. Such was the way of oxygen in the Archean seas. The cyanobacteria continued their endless work, breathing sunlight into the oceans, exhaling invisible gifts. Every breath released oxygen into the waters, and every molecule of oxygen vanished almost at once, captured by the hungry seas. The iron was still abundant, still restless, still waiting to bind. And so it did, greedily, eagerly, pulling every exhalation downward into rust. But oxygen is not patient only, it is persistent. For with every breath came more, and with every passing age, the balance began to shift. The oceans, heavy with minerals, slowly changed. Chemistry, though unseen, was reshaping their very nature. The more iron that was captured and buried, the less remained adrift. The more oxygen that entered the seas, the more the equilibrium tilted. At first, it was impossible to notice. To any eye had there been one, the waters looked the same. To any ear had there been one, there was no sound of disruption. Yet beneath the silence, in every drop, the seas were transforming. Imagine a single breath of oxygen released by a drifting microbe. It binds with iron and falls as dust. Alone, it is nothing. But imagine trillions of breaths, repeated day after day, century after century, eon after eon. The balance cannot remain forever. The iron dwindles little by little, locked into the seafloor. The oxygen continues, persistent, inexhaustible, patient. The seas are like a vessel being slowly filled, their chemistry rewritten by a million unseen hands. The transformation was not only in iron. Oxygen, even in its secrecy, touched everything. It reacted with sulfur, with carbon, with countless other compounds, leaving subtle changes behind. It altered the pathways of life itself, shaping the conditions in which microbes lived and died. It crept into places where it had never been, lingering longer, reaching deeper, waiting for the day when the oceans could no longer consume it all. And yet this great revolution made no sound. It had no single day of beginning, no sudden dawn. It was a story of patience, of persistence, of quiet inevitability. The Earth herself seemed to keep the secret, holding it close, allowing the transformation to unfold unnoticed. The skies remained heavy, dim with methane haze. The seas remained bronze and green, their surfaces calm. To look upon the world then, you might think nothing was changing at all. But beneath, everything was changing. Picture the seafloor. Each layer of red iron, each band of black silica, each stripe upon the stone was evidence of these transformations. They were the diary of oxygen's hidden work, a record of chemistry playing out over millions of years. The microbes themselves were unaware. They breathed because they must, because life is persistence. They knew nothing of the consequences, but their persistence was enough. Their breath carried forward, unseen, until the oceans themselves began to shift around them. There is something almost spiritual in this thought, that the greatest transformations of the Earth have often been invisible, uncelebrated, unnoticed, until long after they were complete. That sometimes change is not loud, but soft. That sometimes power is not sudden, but patient. Oxygen's story was such a transformation, silent, unseen, but unstoppable. The Archean seas remind us that change builds upon itself. One molecule leads to another, one breath follows the last, one layer is stacked upon the previous. Slowly, imperceptibly, the weight grows, the balance tips, and the world is remade. The oceans were learning this truth. The cyanobacteria were teaching it, though they did not know. The earth was listening, recording, remembering in stone and silence. And one day, though not yet, the silence would break. One day the iron would be sated, the seas no longer able to hide their secret. Oxygen would slip past the grasp of the waters into the air, and the skies themselves would change. But for now, the earth was content to wait. For now, the transformations remained hidden. These were the silent transformations, unfolding in patience, in secrecy, in persistence. They remind us that history is not only the story of battles and eruptions, of thunder and fire. It is also the story of whispers, of breaths, of quiet revolutions that happen molecule by molecule, moment by moment, until one day the world has become something entirely new. When we look at the earth today, we see mountains and valleys, forests and rivers, deserts and seas. We see landscapes that shift and change in our lifetimes, trees that grow tall and fall, rivers that carve deeper with each season, mountains that erode and crumble. But beneath these fleeting forms lies a deeper record, one written not in leaves or waves, but in stone. And nowhere is that record more beautiful, more poetic, than in the stripes of the banded iron formations. Each stripe is a memory, each layer a moment of the Earth's breath captured in permanence. The red bands tell of times when oxygen surged, when cyanobacteria bloomed in abundance, filling the seas with their invisible exhalations. The black bands tell of silence, of pauses, of moments when life faltered, when the breath of the seas grew shallow. Together, they form a diary older than any forest, older than any mountain, older even than the continents themselves. Imagine standing before such a formation today. Perhaps it is a cliff face rising out of the desert, the sun casting long shadows across its surface. You place your hand against the stone, and beneath your fingers you trace the lines, red, black, stacked one atop another like the pages of an ancient book. Each stripe is thin, no thicker than your hand, and yet each one represents thousands, perhaps millions of years. As your hand moves upward, you are not tracing a few decades or even centuries. You are climbing through vast oceans of time, reading chapters written long before life had eyes to see them. It is humbling to realize what these stripes mean. They are not abstract marks, not random decorations. They are records of life itself, the breaths of microbes, captured and preserved. The very presence of oxygen in these rocks is proof that life existed, proof that tiny, unseen builders once filled the seas, exhaling quietly, endlessly, until stone remembered them. To walk among banded iron formations is to walk among the ghosts of microbes, to stand in the echo of their whispers, to listen to their story in the silence of stone. These stripes are not merely history, they are poetry. The red and black bands are verses, alternating lines in a song written across billions of years. They carry rhythm, repetition, balance. They tell us that life does not march in a straight line, but ebbs and flows, rises and falls. They remind us that even pauses matter, that silence is part of the music, that absence is as meaningful as presence. Close your eyes and picture the moment when each stripe was made. Oxygen surging, iron binding, rust drifting downward in endless red snow. Then silence, the breath of the cyanobacteria fading, the seas returning to stillness, silica drifting downward to paint its darker shadow. Layer after layer, cycle after cycle, written patiently upon the seafloor. The ocean was not just a body of water, it was a library, collecting volumes of memory, binding them into stone, storing them for futures yet unborn. And now, billions of years later, those pages stand open for us to read. The cliffs of banded iron rise against the sky, their stripes bold and unbroken, their message clear. They tell us, life was here, life worked in silence, life changed the world one breath at a time. There is something comforting in these memories. They remind us that even the smallest actions are recorded, that even the quietest persistence leaves marks. The cyanobacteria did not know they were writing history. They did not intend to change the oceans or the skies, and yet they did. Their breaths became layers, their persistence became monuments, their memory became the stripes we see today. The stripes also remind us of the patience of the earth. They are not quick sketches, they are not sudden bursts. They are slow, deliberate brushstrokes, laid one after another until the canvas is complete. They are the handwriting of time itself, steady, elegant, enduring. They whisper that we too are part of such memory, that our actions, though small, will leave traces that endure long after us. Standing before these formations, one cannot help but feel the weight of deep time. The stripes stretch upward, layer after layer, each one a chapter in a book written over eons. They are older than trees, older than fish, older than the very air we breathe. And yet they remain, clear and bold, waiting for us to listen. The stripes are a memory. They are the Earth's way of keeping a diary, of recording her transformation. They are whispers from a world we can never see, a reminder that history is written not only in words or in bones, but in the very stones beneath our feet. And as we read them, as we trace their patterns and feel their weight, we join in that memory. We become part of the story, not as witnesses who were there, but as listeners who inherit the tale. The banded iron formations are not just rocks. They are voices, they are memories, they are the patient testimony of a world that remembers everything. Time is something we measure in days, in weeks, in years. A birthday marks one cycle, a century seems long, and 1,000 years feels like an eternity. But to the Earth, these measures are no more than heartbeats. To the Earth, time is deep, endless, patient beyond all imagination. And nowhere do we feel this patience more keenly than in the banded iron formations, where each stripe is not just a color, not just a mineral, but an age pressed into stone. A single stripe, perhaps no thicker than the palm of your hand, represents thousands, sometimes millions of years. To us, 1,000,000 years is beyond comprehension. It is longer than the entirety of human history, longer than the rise and fall of civilizations, longer than the span of language itself. And yet, in the stripes of the Earth's diary, 1,000,000 years is but a single page. Think of that. The thick cliff faces, rising hundreds of feet, represent hundreds of millions of years layered one atop another. Entire worlds of time are stacked before us, silent and steady. Imagine standing at the base of such a formation. Your eyes trace upward, following the alternating red and black bands as they climb higher and higher, their lines unbroken, their pattern unwavering. Each stripe is a memory, yes, but it is also a measure of patience. The Earth did not rush to write these layers. She took her time, laying them down grain by grain, molecule by molecule, until the weight of ages pressed them into permanence. To stand before them is to stand before the weight of time itself. And yet this weight is not crushing, it is comforting. It reminds us that time has room for everything. For silence, for breath, for change, for rest. The Earth did not hurry her transformations, and still she achieved wonders beyond measure. The oceans did not rush to cleanse themselves of iron, and still they became clear. The cyanobacteria did not know their purpose, and still they built the foundations of life. The patience of the Earth is not heavy, but gentle, a reminder that we too are carried by time, even when we do not see its movement. Think of your own life. A year may feel long, a decade a milestone, a lifetime an arc complete. But compared to the span of these stones, our lives are as brief as the breath of a single cyanobacterium. And yet, just as each breath mattered in the shaping of the oceans, so too do our moments matter. They may be small, they may be fleeting, but in the rhythm of time, they leave marks, echoes, memories. The weight of time is humbling. It reminds us of our smallness, but also of our connection. The same patience that laid down these stones carries us as well. We are part of the same story, written in different chapters, but bound to the same book. The banded iron formations are not distant relics. They are reminders that everything endures, everything leaves traces, everything is part of the great unfolding. Close your eyes and imagine 1,000,000 years passing. The tides rise and fall, mountains shift, the moon pulls at the seas. Cyanobacteria breathe, exhale, die, and are replaced. Rust falls layer by layer, covering the seafloor. And still the Earth turns. Now imagine 10 million years, 100 million, 500 million. Imagine the patience of stone, building itself grain by grain, until cliffs taller than cathedrals are formed. This is the weight of time, not sudden, not rushed, but steady, eternal, immense. To the Earth, time is not a burden but a gift. It allows her to shape mountains, to carve valleys, to weave oceans into new patterns. It allows her to transform silence into music, breath into stone, rust into monuments. To feel the weight of time is to feel the embrace of eternity, to know that all things change, but that change is never hurried. The stripes of the banded iron formations hold this truth. They are not just stone, not just memory, but time itself made visible. Each band whispers, we waited, we persisted, we endured. And in their whisper, we are reminded that patience is not emptiness. Patience is creation. Patience is strength. Patience is the weight of time carrying the world forward. So when we stand before these cliffs, when we trace the stripes with our hands, we are not only looking back, we are also learning how to live forward, more patient, more gentle, more willing to trust the slow unfolding of things. For if the earth can wait billions of years to paint her masterpiece, then perhaps we too can find comfort in the weight of time. Beneath the ground we walk upon lies a history far older than we can imagine. We may see only soil, grass, stone, or pavement, but hidden below are layers upon layers of Earth's memory, pressed together by ages of time. Among the oldest of these are the banded iron formations, stripes of red and black that began as whispers in the oceans, quiet breaths of microbes, soft snowfalls of rust. Over billions of years, these whispers grew into giants, becoming the very foundations of the continents themselves. At first, the layers were thin, fragile things, dust settling softly on the seafloor. But dust does not remain dust when it is pressed by time. With every new snowfall of iron, with every dark veil of silica, weight increased. Layer upon layer built upward and downward, pressing, compacting, fusing into stone. What began as particles invisible to the eye became strata thick as mountains, broad as plains, strong as the bones of the earth. Imagine standing on the seafloor as these giants grew. At first, there is only bare volcanic rock, sharp and dark, stretching into the distance. Then slowly the red snow falls. It gathers thin at first, almost too delicate to notice. But it does not stop. It falls for centuries, millennia, eons, building ever upward. Black layers follow, then red again, then black. The ground thickens, the weight increases, until what was once a plain of bare stone becomes a fortress of layered rock. And still, the process continues, patient and relentless. Over time, these formations became immense, sheets of stone stretching for hundreds of miles, buried beneath oceans, hidden from the sky. They were giants in waiting, slumbering beneath the waves, storing oxygen in their stripes, storing memory in their colors, waiting for the day when the earth would lift them high. The earth is always moving, always shifting, though too slowly for us to see. The crust bends and folds, mountains rise, continents drift across the face of the globe. And as these movements continued across billions of years, the banded iron formations were carried upward, piece by piece, until they became the deep cores of continents. Today, geologists call them cratons, ancient, stable hearts of land that have endured for eons. They are the anchors of the continents, the immovable bones upon which the shifting skin of the earth is stretched. Think of that. The land beneath your feet may once have been the bottom of a sea, layered with iron snow and silica shadow. The ground we build our homes upon, the stone we carve into monuments, the cliffs that rise above deserts, all of it was shaped by the patience of the oceans, the breath of microbes, the weight of time. We walk every day upon the legacy of the Archean seas, though we seldom notice. And these giants are not only vast, they are old. Some banded iron formations are over 3 billion years in age, older than the oldest mountains, older than the oldest forests, older than the oldest fossils of animals. They endured when continents broke apart, when oceans closed, when mountains rose and fell to dust. They endured ice ages and fire, upheaval and calm. They are survivors, carrying within their stripes the record of a world no human eye will ever see. Standing before them today, one feels their immensity. Towering cliffs of iron-rich stone rise against the sky, their stripes bold and clear, their weight undeniable. It is as though the earth herself is showing us her bones, inviting us to see not just what is, but what has been. These giants beneath our feet are monuments not only to geology, but to life itself, proof that the smallest breath can build the strongest foundations. There is something comforting in their endurance. They remind us that change is not always fleeting, that patience can create permanence. The cyanobacteria did not know they were building giants, yet they did. The oceans did not know they were shaping continents, yet they were. Time itself took the smallest of actions and turned them into the strongest of stones. So when you walk upon the land, when you see a cliff rising in the distance, when you place your hand against the rough face of a red-striped rock, remember, beneath your feet lie giants. They are not mythical creatures of story, but layers of stone older than imagination, built by patience, by silence, by breath. They are the bones of the earth, the silent guardians of memory, the foundations of everything we know. And they endure still, whispering their story to anyone who will pause to listen. For ages beyond counting, the oceans rusted. Breath by breath, molecule by molecule, oxygen met iron and fell to the seafloor in red snow. The cyanobacteria worked tirelessly, never knowing the enormity of their labor, never pausing in their simple rhythm of light and breath. The seas answered them faithfully, binding each exhale, painting their memory in stone. But no process, however vast, can continue forever. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance began to change. The iron that had once filled the seas so abundantly began to wane. Layer after layer, century after century, more and more of it was captured and buried. What had once been a restless, invisible giant, dissolved into every current, was now locked away in stone, slumbering at the bottom of the world. The seas grew lighter, their burdens slowly lifted, though their surface still looked the same. The transformation was hidden, quiet, and patient. Imagine the oceans as a great vessel, filled with iron dissolved in their depths. For billions of years, this vessel had been emptied grain by grain, molecule by molecule, by the invisible hands of oxygen. Now the vessel was nearly drained. The iron, once endless, was now scarce. And as the supply dwindled, the oceans began to change their song. The dance of oxygen and iron slowed, the snowfall of rust thinned. The seafloor, once a canvas painted endlessly, entered a quieter season. This was the sleep of iron. No longer did every molecule of oxygen find a partner waiting eagerly in the waters. No longer did the seas devour each exhale in an instant. More and more, oxygen lingered, hanging suspended in the currents, searching for iron that was no longer there. The balance had shifted. The rusting world was coming to an end, though the cyanobacteria did not know, though the oceans themselves gave no sign but silence. Picture the stillness. The seafloor lies beneath you, covered in stripes of red and black, a diary of ages written patiently over eons. Above, the snowfall has thinned. Fewer flakes of rust drift downward. The waters are quieter now, less burdened, less restless. It is not emptiness but rest. The iron has been gathered, carried into slumber. The oceans, once busy with unseen transformation, now breathe more slowly, preparing for something new. And yet this sleep was not an ending. It was a threshold. With iron gone, oxygen would have nowhere else to hide. It would begin to accumulate, first in the waters, then in the skies. The world was on the edge of its first great revolution, but in that moment, in that long pause, it felt as though the earth was holding her breath, allowing the seas a chance to rest after ages of labor. There is something deeply comforting in this pause. It tells us that even in the grandest of stories, even in the most relentless of processes, there is a need for stillness. The cyanobacteria had worked for ages, and though they continued their breath, the oceans had shifted around them. The rusting was over, the snow was finished, the iron had gone to sleep. Now the world prepares for its next chapter. Think of iron as a giant who had walked the oceans for billions of years, invisible but powerful, shaping the chemistry of the seas. Now that giant lies down, lays its head upon the seafloor, and drifts into slumber. Its body is stone, its dreams are stripes of memory, its rest is eternal. The giant is not gone, but changed. From restless currents to resting cliffs, from invisible presence to silent monuments. Today we walk upon the places where that giant sleeps. In the deserts where red stone stretches beneath the sky, in the cliffs where black and red stripes tower above us, in the valleys where rusted rock glows beneath the sun, we walk upon the bones of iron slumber. The world beneath our feet is the memory of that sleep, the legacy of oceans that grew quiet once the great rusting was done. The sleep of iron was not dramatic. It was not thunder or fire, but silence. It was the gentlest of transitions, the softest of thresholds, the quiet moment before a storm. The oceans exhaled and waited. The cyanobacteria breathed and continued, and the earth, patient as ever, turned slowly beneath a hazy sky, holding close the secret of what was to come. For soon the silence would be broken. Soon oxygen would rise unchecked, spilling from the seas into the air, transforming the sky itself. But that was still ahead. In this chapter, the iron had gone to rest, and the oceans lay quiet, carrying the memory of their labor in stone. It was a pause, a breath, a sleep, and in that stillness, the world prepared for its next great change. Billions of years passed since the last flakes of iron snow drifted into the Archean seas. The oceans shifted, continents stirred, mountains rose and fell, rivers carved valleys, and winds swept across new horizons. Time, patient as ever, lifted the giants of banded iron from their slumber beneath the waves and carried them into the light of the open sky. What had once been hidden at the bottom of silent seas now stood revealed as landscapes of red spread across the face of the earth. These landscapes are unlike any other. They are painted in hues of crimson, maroon, rust, and shadowed black, colors that seem to glow in the sun. The cliffs rise high, their stripes bold and unbroken, telling the story of eons in layers you can trace with your hand. In the deserts of Australia, in the valleys of Canada, in the ranges of Brazil and South Africa, these rocks stand like open books, their pages waiting to be read. They are relics of a time long before forests, long before creatures, long before the sky turned blue. They are windows into the Archean seas, carried into our present. Imagine walking among them. You stand in a desert where the ground is red as fire, the dust clinging to your shoes, the cliffs towering above you. The air is dry, the wind carries whispers, and the stone itself seems to glow in the sunlight. You place your hand against the rock and feel its warmth, the heat of the sun seeping into layers older than imagination. The stripes are clear, red, black, stretching higher than you can reach, stretching farther than your eyes can follow. Each stripe is a memory of oceans long gone, of breaths long vanished, of microbes long turned to dust. In these places, time feels thick. The silence is heavy, not the silence of emptiness but of presence. You feel the weight of the ages pressing down, the knowledge that these stones are older than mountains, older than rivers, older even than the air you breathe. The red landscapes carry you backward, drawing you into a world where iron drifted in the seas and tiny cyanobacteria painted the seafloor with their invisible breath. The beauty of these landscapes is not only in their colors, but in their endurance. For billions of years, they have withstood erosion, weather, and upheaval. They have risen with continents, broken into ranges, crumbled into valleys, yet their stripes remain clear, bold, undeniable. They are resilient, just as the microbes that created them were persistent. They are monuments to patience, carved not by hands, but by the slow artistry of the earth. The red landscapes remind us that the past is never lost. It may be hidden, it may be buried, it may be transformed, but it is always there, waiting to be revealed. When the seas receded, when tectonic forces lifted these stones, the earth was not erasing her memory, but sharing it. She brought her diary into the light, allowing us to walk among her oldest words. There is something deeply moving in standing among these formations, knowing that they were born in oceans where no eyes yet looked, in worlds where no voices yet spoke. To touch them is to bridge billions of years, to place your hand across the divide of deep time and feel the presence of a world long vanished but never forgotten. These landscapes are not quiet relics. They are alive with meaning. They whisper to geologists who read their patterns, to wanderers who stand in awe before their cliffs, to anyone willing to listen. They tell us of patience, of persistence, of change that is slow but unstoppable. They tell us that the smallest of beings can shape the largest of worlds, and that memory is written not only in words, but in stone. The red landscapes stretch across continents, glowing beneath the sun, enduring beneath the stars. They are the bones of iron asleep, the remnants of oceans rusted long ago, the testimony of microbes who breathed without knowing they were shaping futures. They are beautiful, not just for their colors, but for their story, the story of oceans, of breath, of time. And as you walk among them, as you listen to their silence, you feel not only the past, but also the present. For the iron in these cliffs is the same iron that flows in your blood, the same iron that strengthens your bones, the same iron that fuels the tools of civilization. These landscapes are not separate from us. They are part of us. The red is in our veins, the stripes are in our history, the patience is in our very being. To stand in a landscape of red is to stand inside the story of the earth, to become part of the song of time. The cliffs, the valleys, the deserts, they are not just scenery. They are memory made visible, patience made stone, silence made beautiful. They are the voices of the past, whispering across billions of years, reminding us that we are children of the oceans, children of the breath, children of iron and time. The banded iron formations rise around us in cliffs and valleys, their stripes clear and bold, their colors glowing in the light of the sun. They seem eternal, silent, unmoving, but to those who know how to listen, they are not silent at all. They are voices. They are words written in stone. They are pages of a book older than any library waiting to be read. And the readers, the storytellers of this ancient script, are geologists. A geologist does not see only stone when they place their hand against a cliff. They see time. They see oceans long gone, microbes long vanished, breaths long forgotten. They look at the red and black stripes, and where others see color, they see memory. Each layer is a sentence. Each band is a paragraph. Together, they form a story billions of years in the making. Imagine a geologist standing in front of a wall of banded iron. The air is dry, the sun is hot, but their eyes trace the lines as if following a thread through history. They notice the thickness of the bands, the subtle changes in shade, the way the stripes rise and fold across the stone. To them, these details are not random. They are clues. They are voices from the past, whispering of oceans filled with iron, of microbes exhaling oxygen, of snowfalls of rust that lasted for ages. They read the stripes the way one might read the rings of a tree. Each ring tells of a year, a season, a cycle of growth and rest. Each stripe of iron tells of an age, an era of abundance or pause, of life surging or faltering. The black bands speak of times when oxygen waned, when silence settled across the seas. The red bands speak of times when life breathed stronger, when oceans shimmered with invisible exhalations. Together, they are the rhythm of a planet finding its balance. There is poetry in this kind of reading, for though the language of stone is scientific, it is also deeply human. To read the rocks is to become part of their story, to listen to whispers that have waited billions of years to be heard. It is to trace the breath of microbes with your fingertips, to walk through oceans that no longer exist, to witness the patience of the earth in layers of stone. Geologists often say that rocks are the archives of the earth, but archives are silent until someone opens them. The banded iron formations waited patiently for eons, hidden beneath oceans, buried beneath continents, until they rose into the light. Even then, they stood in silence, cliffs in deserts, ranges in remote valleys. It was only when human eyes looked closely, when human minds asked questions, that their voices were heard again. And what stories they tell? They speak of the first breaths of life, the rusting of the oceans, the patience of time. They tell us that the world we know, the blue sky, the air we breathe, the iron in our blood, was shaped by beings too small to see, whose work was recorded in stripes of stone. They tell us that the earth remembers everything, that nothing is ever truly lost, that memory is written not only in words or bones, but in the very ground beneath our feet. Imagine sitting with a geologist in one of these red deserts. The sun is sinking low, painting the cliffs in firelight. They run their hand across a stripe of black, then across a stripe of red. And as they speak, they do not talk only of iron oxides or silica. They talk of breath, of microbes, of patience, of oceans older than imagination. They translate the stone into story, and suddenly the cliffs are no longer silent. They are alive, vibrant, filled with voices from the past. There is something deeply cozy in this act of reading stone. It is like listening to a bedtime story told by the earth herself. The rocks may not move, but they speak. They speak of ages long gone, of rhythms too vast for us to see, of change so patient it becomes eternal. And in listening, we are comforted. For if the earth can remember so much, if she can hold so many stories in silence, then surely we too are remembered. The geologists are not the only readers. You too can read the stones, even if you do not know the language of chemistry or the equations of physics. To stand before banded iron formations is to feel their meaning, to sense their weight. You do not need to know their exact age to know that they are old. You do not need to know the details of their chemistry to know that they are patient. You only need to stand still, to place your hand upon their stripes, to listen with your heart. The stones will tell you what you need to hear, that time is vast, that patience is powerful, that even the smallest actions endure. The geologists may write it down in papers and books, but the cliffs tell it directly, without words, in silence that speaks louder than any voice. Reading the stones is not just science, it is communion. It is the meeting of human curiosity with Earth's patience. It is the act of listening to a world older than ourselves and realizing that we are part of its story, not separate from it. The banded iron formations are not just rocks, they are books, they are cathedrals, they are diaries, and when we read them, when we listen, we step into the rhythm of deep time itself. When we stand before the cliffs of banded iron, when we trace the stripes with our fingers, it is easy to think of stone as silent. But listen closely, and you will hear whispers, voices not of mountains or oceans, but of beings too small to see. The microbes, the cyanobacteria, the tiny builders whose quiet persistence filled the seas with oxygen and painted the seafloor with memory. Their bodies have long since vanished, their colonies dissolved into dust, but their breath remains, written forever into the rocks. These whispers are soft. They do not call out in thunder, nor roar like volcanoes, nor crash like waves. They are subtle, delicate, woven into the iron itself. Every red stripe is a sentence spoken by their breath. Every dark stripe is a pause, a rest, a silence in their song. Together, the bands form not only the diary of the earth, but also the chorus of the microbes, life's first great voice, carried across billions of years. Imagine them in their time. Shallow pools warmed by sunlight, surfaces green with microbial mats. Tiny colonies floating in the upper waters, drifting with the tides, carried by the currents. They knew nothing of continents or skis, nothing of oceans or time. They simply lived. They drank in sunlight, split water, and released oxygen. They breathed without intention, without knowledge, without design. Yet in their breath was power, more than they could ever know. Their whispers were invisible then. No eye saw them, no mind wondered at them. Yet they filled the seas, multiplying beyond measure, painting the waters with their unseen presence. Their whispers became endless, overlapping, weaving into one another until the oceans themselves seemed to hum with their breath. It was not a sound, but a rhythm, a presence, a quiet persistence that carried on unbroken for eons. Now imagine bending close to the cliffs of banded iron today. The stone is warm beneath your hand, the colors deep and bold. You lean in, and though no sound reaches your ears, you feel it, the presence of voices. They are faint, almost imperceptible, but they are there. The red bands whisper, we breathed. The black bands whisper, we paused. Together they whisper, we endured. There is something profoundly moving in realizing that these microbes, so small they cannot be seen without a microscope, changed the destiny of a planet. Their whispers reshaped oceans, carved new pathways for life, and built the foundations of the air we breathe. And yet, they never knew. They did not seek to change the world. They only sought to live, to persist, to breathe. Their greatness lay not in intent, but in patience. The whispers of the microbes remind us that power does not always come from strength or speed or noise. Sometimes, it comes from persistence, from doing the same small thing, day after day, until the world itself bends around it. The cyanobacteria whispered with their breath, and those whispers grew until they filled the earth with oxygen, until they painted stone, until they echoed across billions of years to reach us here. Standing among the cliffs, we become part of that echo. We breathe the oxygen they made, we walk on the continents their rust helped build, we hold in our blood the very iron they left behind. Their whispers are not only in the rocks, they are in us. Every breath we take carries their legacy, every heartbeat pumps iron that once drifted in their seas. We are not separate from them. We are their descendants, their continuation, their living echo. Think of the patience it must have taken. For millions upon millions of years, the microbes whispered, with no audience, no recognition, no sign that their work would endure. And yet, it did. It reminds us that even the smallest voice can matter, that even whispers can change the world, if they are steady enough, patient enough, repeated across time. Today, when geologists read the stones, when wanderers walk among the red cliffs, when storytellers speak of ancient seas, the microbes are remembered. Their whispers are heard again. They are no longer invisible, no longer forgotten. Their song has been translated, their presence honored, their patience recognized. The whispers of the microbes are still here, all around us, carried in stone, in air, in blood, in memory. They tell us, do not underestimate the small, do not dismiss the quiet, do not overlook the patient. For in the end, it was whispers that transformed the earth. For billions of years, oxygen lived in secret, born from the breath of microbes, captured by the hunger of the seas, bound to iron and buried in silence. It never touched the skies, never painted the air, never changed the colors of dawn. But patience has a way of rewriting the world. The oceans, heavy with iron, could only drink so much. And as eons passed, the balance shifted. Slowly, quietly, oxygen began to win. The iron had gone to sleep. The great snowfall of rust that painted the seafloor in stripes grew thinner and thinner until the oceans had captured nearly all they could. The giant of iron, once restless in every tide, now lay bound in stone, its presence buried beneath mountains of memory. The seas, emptied of their burden, no longer swallowed every breath of oxygen. And for the first time, something remarkable began to happen. Oxygen lingered. Imagine a drop of seawater at this moment. Within it, a cyanobacterium floats, a tiny architect exhaling oxygen into the currents. In the past, that oxygen would have vanished instantly, seized by iron, dragged downward into rust. But now it drifts, it remains, it lingers in the water longer than before, touching other molecules, sparking new reactions. The oceans themselves are changing, becoming something new. Waters no longer heavy with iron, but lightened, freer, able to carry oxygen further, deeper, longer. The microbes, as always, knew nothing of this. They continued their endless labor, breathing in sunlight, exhaling into the seas. Their lives were short, their purpose simple, yet the balance around them was shifting. Each exhale now carried more weight, each breath reached further than the last. Slowly, invisibly, the oceans were filling with a presence that could no longer be hidden. This was the prelude to breath, the first quiet steps toward an atmosphere transformed. For soon, the oceans would no longer be able to contain oxygen at all. It would rise, breaking free of the waters, spilling into the air. The sky itself would change, and with it, the fate of all life yet to come. But at this moment, the change was still subtle. The seas did not roar with transformation. The skies did not suddenly turn blue. Instead, the world was caught in a quiet balance, a delicate threshold between past and future. Oxygen lingered, iron slept, and the earth prepared for what was coming. Picture the stillness of this moment. The seafloor lies buried in thick layers of rust and silica, its stripes marking billions of years of memory. The oceans roll above, calmer now, their currents lighter, their chemistry shifting. Cyanobacteria drift in the shallows, unaware of their power, unaware of the future they are building. And above it all, the sky remains hazy, dim with methane, the sun's light still filtered into copper and gold. To the eye, nothing has changed. But in the hidden language of chemistry, everything is different. There is a tension in this threshold, like the pause before a note in music, like the silence before dawn. The earth is holding her breath. She is waiting, gathering, balancing. The oceans are nearly finished with their work, nearly ready to release their secret. And when they do, the world will be rewritten. The prelude to breath is a story of patience rewarded. It shows us that even the smallest persistence, carried through time, can tip the scales. For billions of years, oxygen had been hidden, consumed, silenced, but it never ceased. It kept appearing, breath by breath, exhale by exhale, until at last the balance was ready to shift. The oceans could no longer hold it back. The skies could no longer remain untouched. Soon the earth would breathe for the first time. Soon the haze would thin, the skies would clear, and oxygen would flood the air. Soon life as we know it will begin. But in this moment, in this prelude, there was only silence, only patience, only the quiet accumulation of breath. The earth teaches us here that change is not always sudden. Sometimes it builds in secret, unseen, until the world can no longer remain the same. Sometimes revolutions begin as whispers, as pauses, as preludes. And then, all at once, the song begins. Every great change carries a price. For billions of years, oxygen had been held in secret, bound in rust, hidden beneath the seas. But once the iron had gone to sleep, once the oceans could no longer consume every breath, oxygen began to rise. It slipped free of the waters and drifted into the skies. At first, it was subtle, invisible, a trace in the air. But breath by breath, exhale by exhale, it grew. And with that growth came transformation, magnificent for the future, but devastating for the present. The world before oxygen was a world of silence, heavy with gases unfamiliar to us. Methane cloaked the skies, giving the earth its hazy veil. Life was simple, fragile, and anaerobic. It thrived in a world without oxygen, in an environment we would find unlivable. For these early forms of life, oxygen was not a gift. It was poison. What to us is breath, to them was death. Imagine the oceans filled with such creatures, tiny, simple microbes, flourishing in the absence of oxygen. They had existed for millions upon millions of years, building their own rhythms, their own worlds, their own balance. But now, slowly, invisibly, oxygen seeped into their waters. At first, it was tolerable. Pockets of oxygen rose and fell, disappearing as quickly as they came. But over time, those pockets grew larger. They lingered longer. Oxygen spreads further and deeper. For the anaerobic life of that world, there was nowhere left to hide. It is difficult for us to imagine oxygen as a weapon, as a catastrophe, but to those ancient organisms, it was just that. It corroded their chemistry, poisoned their pathways, brought endings to lives that had known nothing else. Slowly, entire lineages vanished, swept aside by a tide they could not resist. It was an extinction unlike any before it, a quiet, invisible catastrophe, where death came not from fire or impact, but from breath itself. And yet, even as old life faltered, new life was given room to flourish. Oxygen was destructive, yes, but it was also possible. It opened pathways of energy more powerful than any that had come before. It made complexity possible, diversity inevitable. It was the foundation upon which the great forests, the great animals, the great civilizations of the future would rise. In destroying one world, it built another. This is the paradox of transformation, that creation often walks hand in hand with loss. The Great Oxidation was not simply a triumph, not simply a dawn, it was also dusk. It was a turning of the page, where one chapter ended so another could begin. And the price of that beginning was the end of countless lives, countless lineages, countless possibilities we will never know. Picture the Earth at this time. The skies, once thick and hazy, begin to change. Slowly they clear, the methane haze thinning, the first blue stretching faintly overhead. The oceans shift, their chemistry transformed by oxygen's presence. The cliffs of banded iron are complete, their stripes sealed, their memory written. And the microbial world, once unified in its silence, is divided. Some thrive in the new oxygenated niches, adapting, evolving, multiplying. Others vanish, their whispers silenced forever. It is a sobering thought, that progress is not without cost, that every gain carries with it a shadow. Yet there is beauty in this too, for the earth does not cling, she transforms. She allows endings so that beginnings may come. She carries memory in stone, but she writes new chapters in air. The price of change is loss, but the gift of change is life renewed. The banded iron formations themselves remind us of this truth. Their stripes are complete, their story of rust finished. They are monuments to a world that no longer exists, relics of oceans that will never return. But they are also the foundation of everything that followed. Without their formation, without the sleep of iron, there would be no oxygen in the skies, no forests, no animals, no us. The cliffs remind us that endings and beginnings are bound together, inseparable, eternal. The price of change was high. Entire worlds of life were lost, but in their place rose a future vast and unimaginable. The oxygen-rich skies would give rise to diversity beyond counting, to beauty beyond measure, to possibility without end. The earth does not mourn as we do. She remembers, she transforms, she continues. And so, as oxygen spread across the globe, the world itself became something new. The haze lifted, the skies turned blue, breath became the rhythm of life. It was the price of change, and it was the gift of it too. The banded iron formations are more than memories of deep time. They are not only relics of vanished oceans or diaries of microbes long gone. They are also foundations of our present, stones that have quietly shaped the world we know today. For these ancient stripes of red and black, pressed beneath oceans billions of years ago, became the iron that built our civilizations, the iron that flows through our veins, the iron that binds our lives to theirs. When the oceans laid down their snow of rust, they did not know they were preparing a gift. The microbes did not intend it, the seas did not plan it, the earth did not design it. But time, in her patience, turned those layers into something enduring, something vast. The deposits of iron that settled on the seafloor became some of the largest stores of metal the earth has ever known. Locked away in stone, they waited, quiet and patient, until the day would come when new beings, creatures with hands, tools and dreams, would uncover them. That day came with us. Humans, curious and restless, learned to dig into the earth, to draw out her hidden resources. And among the most important of these was iron. From the earliest smelted tools to the towering bridges of steel, From plows that turned the soil to railroads that crossed continents, from the armor of warriors to the frames of cities, iron has been our constant companion. It has carried us forward, shaping our history as surely as it once shaped the seas. Think of that connection: the sword of an ancient soldier, the rail of a train, the skeleton of a skyscraper, all of them built from the breath of cyanobacteria, from the patience of oceans, from the rust that fell in silence 3 billion years ago. Every beam of steel, every engine, every tool of iron is part of that story. We do not only live upon the memory of the banded iron formations, we live with them, we live through them. And it is not only in stone and steel that their legacy endures, it is also in us. The iron in those ancient oceans did not only settle into rock, it also became part of life. Over billions of years, oxygen and iron wove themselves into biology, into the chemistry of blood and breath. Today, the iron that carries oxygen through our veins is the same element that once drifted through Archean seas, the same element that painted the seafloor in stripes of red. With every heartbeat, with every inhale, we carry the memory of those oceans inside us. Imagine the earth smiling at this, her great patience rewarded. The iron that once burdened her seas now gives strength to our bodies. The oxygen that once poisoned life now sustains it. The stones that once lay silent beneath the waters now rise into cliffs, into monuments, into the very bones of our world. The past is not gone, it is living, breathing, enduring in every moment of our present. The banded iron formations also built our understanding. They remind us that the earth keeps records, that her memory is long and her patience infinite. They teach us that nothing is wasted, that even the smallest of breaths can leave traces that last billions of years. They are teachers as much as they are stones, guides whispering that persistence shapes the future, that silence can be more powerful than noise, that patience creates permanence. Walk through a modern city and look at the beams of steel holding bridges, the rails carrying trains, the towers rising into the sky. Beneath their shine is a story older than humanity, older than animals, older than forests. Beneath their strength lies the patience of cyanobacteria, the breath of microbes, the rust of ancient seas. We live inside their legacy without always realizing it. Our modern world is built, quite literally, from the whispers of the Archean. And perhaps that is the most humbling thought of all, that our story is not separate from theirs, but a continuation. That we are not standing apart from the banded iron formations, marveling at them as relics of the past, but living as part of their unfolding. The stones that built our world are not only beneath our feet, they are within us, around us, above us, woven into every bridge and every breath. The cliffs of red and black remind us that history is never lost. It endures in memory, in stone, in blood, in civilization. They remind us that we are children of oceans, children of microbes, children of iron and time. The world we built is the world they began. The stones that built our world are the stones of their whispers, the stones of their patience, the stones of their breath. There is a moment, standing before the red cliffs of banded iron, when you realize something astonishing. The same iron that lies in those ancient stones also flows within you. The same element that once drifted invisibly through Archean seas, that once bound with oxygen and fell as rust to the seafloor, now binds with oxygen in your blood, carrying it through your body, sustaining your life with every beat of your heart. The iron in our veins is ancient. It is not new, not freshly made. It was forged in stars long before the Earth existed, scattered across the galaxy in the death of suns, gathered into the young planet, dissolved in the oceans, captured in stone. And some of it, much of it, was once part of those great banded formations. It has moved through cycles unimaginable, from fire to sea to stone to life, until at last it found its way into us. We are living vessels of deep time, carrying echoes of the Earth's earliest chapters in the very rhythm of our bodies. Every breath you take depends on iron. Inside your red blood cells are tiny proteins called hemoglobin, each shaped like a delicate cradle holding an atom of iron at its heart. It is this iron that seizes oxygen as you inhale, binding it, carrying it through your veins, releasing it where your body needs it most. Without iron, there would be no breath, no energy, no life as we know it. Without iron, the story of those ancient microbes would not live on in us. Imagine that for a moment, the oxygen you just inhaled is bound, this very second, to atoms of iron inside your body, iron that once drifted through Archean seas 3 billion years ago, iron that once painted the seafloor in layers of rust, iron that once lay buried in silence beneath the waves. Each heartbeat, each inhale, is an echo of the oceans that came before, a continuation of the story written in stripes of stone. There is poetry in this connection. The cyanobacteria breathed oxygen into the seas, and oxygen bound to iron, falling as rust. Today you breathe oxygen into your lungs, and oxygen binds to iron in your blood, flowing as life. The same dance continues, shifted from oceans to bodies, from seafloor to heartbeat. We carry the microbes' legacy not only in memory, but in biology. Their whispers are in our blood, their persistence in our pulse. Think of the intimacy of this truth. Every time your heart beats, every time your lungs fill, you are joined to them. You are not separate from those ancient seas, you are their descendant, their continuation, their echo. The iron that once slumbered in stone now flows through your veins, bright and alive, keeping you connected to the patience of the earth. And it is not only you. Every bird that flies, every tree that breathes, every animal that runs carries iron in its tissues, its blood, its life. All of us are children of those oceans, bound together by the same element, connected across billions of years by the same quiet chemistry. The rust of the earth became the blood of the world. There is something profoundly humbling in knowing that within you is the memory of stars and seas, of microbes and stone, that the iron you carry is older than the mountains, older than the continents, older even than the blue of the sky. That with every heartbeat, you are living history, a continuation of whispers that began long before human voices ever filled the air. Place your hand over your chest, feel the pulse. That rhythm is not only yours, it is the rhythm of the earth, the rhythm of the oceans, the rhythm of cyanobacteria breathing in the Archean shallows. It is the rhythm of time itself, flowing through you in silence. The echoes of the past are not distant, they are here, alive within you, binding your breath to the very first breath of life. The banded iron formations stand as monuments in stone, but you are also a monument, a living reminder of what came before. The iron in your blood is their story carried forward, their song still being sung. With every heartbeat, with every inhale, you are part of the echo. You are not just reading their memory, you are their memory, walking, breathing, alive. The echoes in blood are the most intimate reminder that we are of the earth, not apart from it. That the patience of microbes, the silence of oceans, the weight of time all flow within us. That we are bound not only to the past, but to the future, carrying forward the story of iron and breath, whispering it into tomorrow with every beat of our hearts. The cliffs of banded iron rise tall and silent, their stripes bold against the sky. At first glance, they seem simple, red and black, repeated again and again like the steady beat of a drum. But for those who look closer, for those who listen with patience, these stripes reveal more than color. They reveal clues. Hidden within the rocks are details that speak of oceans long gone, of chemistry long finished, of lives too small to see but too mighty to forget. Geologists, the readers of stone, know that every layer is more than it appears. The thickness of a stripe, the sharpness of its edge, the minerals that form its body, all are messages from the past. A wide band of red may speak of ages when oxygen surged, when microbes thrived in shallow seas and painted the world with their breath. A thin, wavering band may tell of struggles, of times when conditions shifted, when life faltered and nearly disappeared. The black layers, quiet and dark, whisper of pauses, of silences when oxygen grew scarce and the seas returned to shadow. Each clue is subtle, but together they build a story. The rocks become not just memory, but testimony. They tell us how the earth changed, how oxygen was born, how the oceans shifted, how the world moved slowly toward the skies we breathe today. To trace these clues is to walk with the earth, to follow her footsteps across billions of years. Imagine a geologist with a small hammer in hand, gently chipping at the stone. They lean close, examining the layers under a lens. To most of us, the rock would look ordinary, red, black, but to them it is alive with detail. They see the shimmer of hematite, the subtle gleam of magnetite, the fine grains of silica. Each mineral speaks of different conditions, some formed in shallow waters, others in deeper seas, some in oxygen-rich times, others in oxygen-poor. The stone becomes a map, a record of environments that no longer exist. The rocks also carry traces invisible to the eye. Within their layers, geologists find isotopes, tiny variations in atoms that reveal the chemistry of the past. These isotopes are like fingerprints, each one a mark left by the conditions of its time. They tell of temperatures, of chemical reactions, of the presence or absence of life. They are whispers too small to hear, yet together they shout across billions of years, confirming the story written in stripes. There are clues, too, in the sheer scale of the formations. Their vastness tells us how long the process endured, how persistent the microbes were, how patient the Earth was in building her diary. No sudden event could have created such immensity. Only persistence, only time, only the endless breath of life could leave monuments so great. And then there are the shapes of the rocks themselves. Some layers fold gently, bent by the slow movement of the Earth's crust. Others fracture, broken by ancient pressures, their stripes offset like lines in a torn book. These shapes are not flaws, they are part of the story. They tell us of continents drifting, of mountains rising, of oceans closing and opening again. They remind us that the memory of the seas is not still, but alive, carried forward through the restless movements of the planet. To read these clues is to realize that the banded iron formations are more than history. They are conversations. They speak to us across eons, offering evidence, hints, fragments, from which we can piece together the story of a world we never saw. It is detective work, but it is also poetry, the act of listening to whispers too old to be heard and translating them into words we can understand. Standing among the cliffs, we may not see the isotopes, the minerals, the subtleties of thickness and edge, but we can feel their presence. We can sense that these rocks are not silent, but filled with meaning. They are books written in a language older than words, filled with clues waiting for anyone willing to read. The clues in the rocks tell us that nothing is ever truly lost. The oceans are gone, the microbes dissolved, the world transformed, but the memory remains, pressed into stone, waiting in silence. The earth remembers always, and if we are patient enough, if we are gentle enough, if we are willing to listen, we can hear her memory in the clues she leaves behind. The story of the banded iron formations is, at its heart, a story of patience. The patience of microbes, breathing steadily for billions of years. The patience of the oceans, holding iron in suspension until each molecule found its match. The patience of the earth herself, layering memory upon memory, building cathedrals of stone not in centuries, not in millennia, but in eons. And from this patience came transformation, slow, quiet, unstoppable. Patience is not emptiness. It is not the absence of change. It is the presence of steady, persistent work, carried forward over time too vast to measure. The cyanobacteria were patient not because they chose to be, but because their lives were simple, their actions repeated endlessly. Yet from their repetition came revolutions. Breath by breath, they filled the seas. Breath by breath, they painted the seafloor. Breath by breath, they altered the destiny of a planet. The oceans, too, were patient. They did not rush to cleanse themselves of iron. They carried it for ages, dissolving it, spreading it, binding it only when oxygen offered its hand. Slowly, molecule by molecule, they transformed. No storm, no eruption, no sudden event could have done what the oceans did with their patience. They showed us that even the heaviest burdens can be lifted if given enough time. And the earth, most patient of all, recorded everything. She pressed each snowfall of rust into stone, each pause into black shadow, each cycle into stripes that would endure for billions of years. She did not erase, she did not forget. She remembered in silence, carrying forward every whisper, every pause, every breath. Her patience is what allows us to stand today before cliffs of red and black and hear their voices. The gift of patience is not only in what it creates, but in what it teaches. It teaches that greatness is not always loud, that change does not always roar, that persistence, small, steady, repeated, can shape mountains, carve valleys, and build the foundations of life itself. It teaches that endings come slowly, that beginnings arrive gently, that the world is not hurried but steady. Think of the lessons the banded iron formations give us. They remind us that silence is not wasted time, that pauses are not empty, but part of the rhythm. The black bands are as meaningful as the red, the rest are as important as the song. They remind us that patience is not waiting without purpose, it is creation unfolding too slowly for our eyes to see. In our lives we often rush. We measure time in days, in years, in deadlines and milestones. We long for change to come quickly, for answers to arrive soon. But the earth whispers to us through her stones, slow down, trust the process. Let patience do its work. For if microbes could build continents with breath, if oceans could transform themselves with rust, if the earth could paint her masterpiece in silence, then surely the changes in our lives can unfold in their own time too. Patience is a gift because it frees us. It frees us from the urgency of now, from the fear of silence, from the weight of haste. It reminds us that the smallest actions matter, that repetition builds permanence, that persistence is more powerful than speed. The cyanobacteria never knew the future they were shaping, but they kept breathing all the same. And because they did, we are here. The gift of patience is all around us. It is in the growth of a tree, ring by ring. It is in the carving of a canyon, grain by grain. It is in the turning of seasons, the rise and fall of tides, the heartbeat of the earth herself. And it is within us too, in our breath, in our blood, in the iron that binds us to those ancient seas. To sit with the banded iron formations, to trace their stripes, to listen to their silence, is to receive that gift. It is to remember that time is vast, that change is slow, that patience is not weakness but strength. It is to feel comfort in knowing that we too are part of that rhythm, that we are carried forward not in haste but in steadiness. The cliffs remind us persistence matters, silence matters, patience creates, and the gift of patience is the world we inherit, a world built from whispers, from breaths, from rust, from time itself. Look up, the sky you see, the vast expanse of blue, the shifting clouds, the air that fills your lungs, is a gift of deep time. It is the breath of today, carried across billions of years from the whispers of microbes who once floated in shallow seas. Every inhale you take is part of their story, a continuation of a rhythm that began long before forests grew, long before mountains rose, long before the first creatures stirred in the waters. The air we breathe is almost 1/5 oxygen. To us, this seems natural, ordinary, but for most of Earth's history it was unimaginable. For billions of years, the skies held no oxygen, only haze, thick with methane and carbon dioxide. The Earth was wrapped in a veil, her horizons dim, her air unbreathable. And then came the microbes, the cyanobacteria, exhaling quietly, endlessly, until their breath tipped the balance. They painted the oceans with rust, and when the iron was gone, they painted the skies with air. Today we live inside that gift. With every breath, we join a cycle that has flowed since the Archean. Oxygen enters our lungs, binds to the iron in our blood, and flows through us, carrying life into every cell. We exhale carbon dioxide, which trees and plants drink in, giving back oxygen in return. It is a cycle of generosity, a rhythm of giving and receiving, carried forward from those first whispers in the sea. Imagine the sky before oxygen. Hazy, copper-colored, dim. Now imagine the sky after the haze thinning, the first glimmers of blue appearing, the light scattering cleanly through the air. It must have been slow, imperceptible to any eye that might have been there, but monumental all the same. The world was remade, not in fire, not in sudden eruption, but in breath. And that breath has endured until now, filling the lungs of every creature that walks, swims, or flies. The breath of today is not separate from the past. It is the past, carried forward, renewed in every inhale. The oxygen we breathe now may well include atoms first released billions of years ago, recycled endlessly through oceans, through rocks, through forests, through us. In this way, the world is not only old but immediate, not only ancient but present. The Archean is not gone. It is alive in every moment, every breath, every heartbeat. There is comfort in this connection. It reminds us that we are not apart from the earth, but part of her. The air that fills our lungs is the same that filled the lungs of dinosaurs, the same that whispered across the feathers of the first birds, the same that carried the flight of insects and the songs of whales. It is the same air first born in silence, in patience, in the breath of microbes drifting in forgotten seas. The breath of today is also fragile. Just as oxygen was once scarce, hard-won through eons of persistence, so too can it be changed, disrupted, diminished. The earth reminds us through her patience that what is created slowly can be altered quickly. The gift of oxygen is not guaranteed. It is a cycle we share, a responsibility we hold. To breathe is not only to receive, but also to care, to protect, to honor the legacy of deep time. Close your eyes now and take a slow breath. Feel the air fill your lungs, feel the rise of your chest, feel the oxygen flowing into your blood. That breath connects you to the cyanobacteria of the Archean, to the cliffs of banded iron, to the endless patience of the earth. It connects you to forests, to rivers, to mountains, to every living thing around you. It is not only breath, it is belonging. The breath of today is the culmination of patience, the song of time, the echo of oceans long gone. It is the reminder that small beginnings can create vast futures, that whispers can become worlds, that the air itself is a story carried forward. And as you breathe, you are part of it. You are not just living in the present, you are carrying the past within you and shaping the future with every inhale, every exhale, every heartbeat. When we think of power, we often think of noise. We imagine storms tearing across the sky, volcanoes roaring with fire, rivers crashing down valleys. We imagine the loud, the sudden, the dramatic. Yet the story of the banded iron formations reminds us of another kind of power, one that is quiet, unseen, patient. It is the power of silence. The cyanobacteria worked in silence. They had no voices, no cries, no thunder. They floated in the seas, exhaling oxygen into the waters, unseen and unnoticed. Their whispers never broke the hush of the oceans, and yet, in that silence, they built cathedrals of stone. They reshaped the chemistry of a planet. They laid the foundations of every breath we take today. The oceans themselves transformed in silence. Iron vanished into rust without sound, particle by particle, molecule by molecule. The seafloor grew thick with layers, but no noise marked their fall. For millions of years, red snow drifted downward, soft as a dream, silent as night. And when the iron finally slept, when oxygen began to rise into the skies, the earth gave no roar of announcement. Change arrived quietly, gently, as though the world itself were breathing in calm. There are lessons here for us. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space. It is where persistence gathers, where patience unfolds, where strength takes shape. The cyanobacteria did not need noise to matter. They did not need spectacle to endure. Their silence was enough because their work was steady, because their breath was faithful, because time itself honored them. In our own lives, we often fear silence. We fill it with words, with noise, with motion. We think that progress must always be visible, that change must always be loud. But the earth whispers otherwise. She reminds us that some of the most profound transformations happen quietly, beneath the surface, beyond notice. A seed buried in soil, a thought turning slowly in the mind, a kindness given without fanfare. These too are banded iron formations in the making, silent acts that, given time, build monuments. Imagine standing in front of a cliff of banded iron. The air is still, the silence heavy. You place your hand upon the stone and feel its warmth. No sound rises from it, no movement stirs it. And yet you know, it is alive with memory, alive with meaning. The silence does not make it empty, the silence makes it profound. The microbes whisper to us still, do not fear silence, work within it, trust it. The oceans whisper, change need not roar, it can arrive as softly as falling dust. The earth whispers, patience and silence together create strength that endures beyond all measure. Silence is a gift. It is where the world gathers herself, where the invisible becomes possible, where the greatest transformations begin. To honor silence is to honor the lessons of the earth. To rest in it is to join the rhythm of deep time. So the next time you sit in silence, the next time the world feels still, remember the Archean seas. Remember the microbes drifting without sound. Remember the snow of iron falling without noise. Remember the stripes of stone forming without announcement. Remember that silence is not absence, it is creation, slow and steady, waiting to be revealed. The banded iron formations stand today as monuments to silence. Their stripes are proof that quiet persistence is enough, that noise is not required for meaning, that the world's deepest lessons are written in stillness. And when we listen, when we allow silence to teach us, we find ourselves part of that rhythm too. There are places on Earth where time seems to stand still, places where the silence is heavy, where the air feels thick with history, where the stones themselves seem to watch and remember. The banded iron formations are such places. They rise as walls of red and black, stripes bold against the horizon, testaments to patience, persistence, and memory. They are not only rocks, they are cathedrals of memory. Imagine standing before one of these cliffs at dawn. The sun has just risen, its light spilling across the landscape, glowing warmly upon the stone. The red bands flare with color, deep and rich, while the black bands hold their shadows, cool and solemn. The air is quiet. No sound but the wind moves across the surface, yet the cliff seems alive, filled with voices that have waited for billions of years to be heard. Each stripe is a memory, pressed into permanence by time. The red layers whisper of life's breath, of cyanobacteria exhaling oxygen, of rust drifting downward like snow, of oceans slowly transforming in silence. The black layers whisper of pauses, of times when oxygen faltered, when silence returned, when the seas rested. Together, the bands form verses of an ancient hymn, a song written not in sound, but in stone. To walk along such cliffs is to walk inside a cathedral without a roof or walls, where the ceiling is the sky and the floor is the earth. The bands are columns, rising upward, repeating in rhythm, steady and solemn. They are stained glass made of stone, glowing red in the sunlight, darkening into shadow where the cliff curves away. You do not need to understand geology to feel their presence. You only need to be still, to listen, to let the memory of the earth wash over you. These cathedrals of memory are older than mountains, older than forests, older even than the air we breathe. They stood in silence while continents drifted, while oceans opened and closed, while species rose and vanished. They endured ice ages, impacts, upheavals, yet their stripes remain clear and bold. They are sanctuaries of time, holding within them the memory of a world no human eye will ever see. And yet, though they are vast, they are also intimate, for their story is not distant, it is within us. The iron that forms their stripes is the iron that flows through our veins. The oxygen that paints their layers is the oxygen we breathe. When we stand before them, we are not outside observers. We are participants, continuations of their story, living pages in the same book. The cathedrals of memory do not only hold the past. They connect it to the present, binding us to the breath of the Archean seas. There is something deeply comforting in their endurance. They remind us that memory does not fade, that stories are never lost, that time carries everything forward. The cyanobacteria did not know their breath would be remembered, yet it was. The oceans did not know their silence would become song, yet it did. The earth does not forget. She holds memories in stone, in cliffs, in cathedrals of red and black that rise against the sky. To step into these cathedrals is to feel the sacredness of patience. They were not built in haste, not carved in noise, not raised by hands. They were built grain by grain, molecule by molecule, over billions of years. They remind us that beauty does not need speed, that greatness does not need intention, that memory is made not in moments, but in persistence. The cathedrals of memory are open to all. You do not need to pray, you do not need to study, you do not need to explain. You only need to stand still, to place your hand against the stone, to feel the warmth of the sun on its surface and the coolness of shadow in its depths. You only need to breathe and remember that your breath is part of theirs, your life part of their story. And in that moment, surrounded by stone and silence, you realize you are inside a cathedral older than time as we know it. A cathedral built not by architects, but by patience. A cathedral that whispers across billions of years, I remember, I endure, you are part of me. When we look upon the cliffs of banded iron, we are not only seeing stone. We are seeing oceans, oceans that no longer exist, oceans that vanished billions of years ago, oceans whose tides and waves have long since fallen silent. These cliffs are their memory, their diary, their monument. The stripes of red and black are the echoes of waters that once rolled across the young earth, heavy with iron, alive with microbes, transformed by whispers of oxygen. Imagine standing before such a cliff. The sun is hot, the desert air dry, yet the stone before you hums with a memory of water. Each red band was once a snowfall of rust drifting through the depths. Each black band was once a pause in oxygen's breath, a silence upon the tides. Together, they are the rhythm of oceans remembered, pressed into permanence. Close your eyes and let the cliffs carry you back. The desert air fades into salt wind. The silence of stone becomes the hush of waves. You are standing not before a wall of rock, but upon the shore of an Archean sea. The sky above you is hazy, bronze and gold, the sun filtered through methane. The water stretches vast and endless, its surface greenish, its depths filled with iron invisible, yet everywhere. Beneath those waters, cyanobacteria drift, exhaling oxygen, their invisible breath binding with iron, falling softly as rust. The waves lap gently, the tides move patiently, and with every moment memory is written. The oceans were the first storytellers. They collected the breath of life, the whispers of microbes, the chemistry of transformation, and they passed it downward into layers that would endure. They remembered not with words, but with rust. They remembered not with sound, but with silence. They remembered in stripes of red and black, each one a verse in a hymn of patience. Now, billions of years later, when the seas are gone and the cliffs stand dry, those memories remain. The oceans themselves may have vanished, but their story endures in stone. To walk among banded iron formations is to walk through the memory of water, to trace with your fingers the tides of a world long gone. The cliffs are not only rock, they are oceans fossilized, oceans remembered. There is something humbling in this. We think of oceans as vast, eternal, unchanging, but oceans too come and go. They rise and fall, open and close, exist for a time and then vanish. Yet they do not disappear without trace. They leave memory behind, pressed into stone, carried forward into the present. The cliffs remind us that even when something is gone, it is never truly lost. The earth remembers, always. Imagine rain falling upon these cliffs today, a storm passing over the desert. Water beads upon the red stone, trickling downward. The stone drinks it in, as though remembering what it once was, as though whispering, "I have known oceans. I have carried tides. I have been beneath waves." The water of the present touches the memory of the past, and for a moment, the story feels complete. These oceans remembered are not distant, they are part of us. The iron they carried flows in our veins. The oxygen they once consumed fills our lungs. The breath of microbes that once drifted through their currents is the breath that sustains us still. We are not separate from these vanished seas. We are their continuation, their legacy, their living memory. When you stand before a banded iron formation, let yourself hear the waves in its silence. Let yourself feel the tide in its stripes. Let yourself remember that you are standing not only before stone, but within the memory of oceans. The cliffs are their voice, their presence, their enduring gift. The seas may be gone, but they are not forgotten. They rise again in red cliffs and black stripes, in whispers of rust and shadow. They rise again in our breath, in our blood, in our being. The oceans are remembered, and through us, they live still. Every story has an ending, yet some endings are not final. Some endings open into new beginnings, into continuations that stretch beyond imagination. The story of the banded iron formations is one such tale. It began with whispers too small to see, with breaths too fragile to notice, and it became cathedrals of stone, continents of memory, skis filled with air. And even now, billions of years later, it has not ended. It continues in cliffs, in blood, in breath, in us. The cyanobacteria never knew their place in history. They drifted in the shallows, breathed in the light, exhaled their gift into the seas. They knew nothing of continents, nothing of skis, nothing of futures, yet their persistence was enough. They wrote their story not in words, but in oxygen, in rust, in patience. They were the first authors, and their script was stone. The oceans, too, played their part. They carried the whispers of microbes, bound them in iron, and pressed them into the seafloor. They remembered everything, even as they changed, even as they vanished. They gave their memory to the earth, who lifted it high as cliffs, who spread it wide across continents, who preserved it for us to see today. The oceans were storytellers, and their voice was silent. And the earth herself was the keeper of this tale. Patient, steady, eternal, she layered memory upon memory, never erasing, never forgetting. She folded her diary into stone, carried it through upheavals and ice, through fire and drift, until the time came for human eyes to read it. We are not the first to receive this story. The cliffs have told it in silence for eons, but we are the first to listen with words, the first to shape their whispers into meaning. The story is not finished. It flows in our veins, in the iron that carries our breath. It surrounds us in the air, in the oxygen that fills our lungs. It stands before us in stone, in the cliffs of red and black that rise against the sky. And it lives in us, for we are children of those microbes, descendants of those oceans, inheritors of patience and silence and time. We are part of the story, and we continue it with every breath. There is a comfort in this, to know that we are not separate, not alone, but woven into a narrative billions of years old. To know that our lives, fleeting as they seem, are threads in the same tapestry that includes rusting seas and whispering microbes. To know that when we breathe with them, through them, because of them. The endless story is not one of noise or spectacle. It is one of whispers, of persistence, of patience. It teaches us that greatness does not always roar, that memory does not always shout, that the smallest of actions, repeated with time, can create cathedrals, can build continents, can shape worlds. It teaches us that silence is not emptiness, but fullness, where change gathers until it spills into being. Look to the cliffs and see their stripes. Place your hand upon their warmth and feel the weight of ages. Close your eyes and breathe, and know that you are part of the same rhythm, the same memory, the same story. The banded iron formations are not just rocks. They are pages, they are voices, their patience is visible. And so the story continues. It continues in forests and rivers, in mountains and skies, in every living thing that breathes. It continues in us, in our blood, in our hearts, in our whispers. It continues because time never stops, because memory never fades, because the earth never forgets. This is the endless story, the story of microbes and oceans, of iron and silence, of patience and time. The story of life itself, carried forward across billions of years, into the breath of today, into the dreams of tomorrow. It is a story without end, because it is the story of the earth and of us, and of everything that is yet to come.